Good evening. Welcome to the RSU 14 Board of Directors meeting. The date of the meeting is March 31st, 2021, and the time is 6:30. Jenny Cummings, our board chair, is unable to be with us tonight, so I will be taking the helm. Just a few things before we get started, and I'm looking at participants. We're at 131. If we reach our Zoom capacity of 300, our meeting can be accessed on TV 7, Wyndham. And as mentioned, we're also recording this meeting, which will appear on our website. So thank you all for joining. Mr. Howell, roll call, please.
Kate Bricks.
Here.
Jenny Butler.
Here.
Jenny Cummings. Marge Gavoni.
Here.
Pete Hensler.
Here.
Anna Keeney.
Here.
Kate Levier.
Here.
Scott McLean.
Here.
Christina Small.
Here.
Molly Cochran.
Here.
Thank you. Will you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Marge. Mr. Howell, are there any adjustments to the agenda?
We have just a couple of very small adjustments to the agenda tonight. And the first one is actually under item 6, where when the agenda went out, we didn't include, because we are going to be having some public comment and board discussion tonight, opportunity for that. And then additionally, underneath the budget update, an opportunity for public comment on where we are in the version 5 budget.
Perfect. Thank you. Now's the time for public input. Anything that is not currently on the agenda, we welcome your comments. Please raise your hand if you have a comment. I'm going to rely on you, Christine. I only see one screen.
I do not see any hands, and I know Superintendent Howell will be reviewing how, for those joining us who are not familiar with Zoom, if you would like to raise your hand. I see Becca Cole has her hand up, and just to finish that thought, if you all go down to the reactions at the bottom under all your tiles, you'll see, if you click on reactions, it's a smiley face with a plus sign. You'll notice the bottom, there's a bar that says raise hand, and I'll be monitoring hands as they go up, and then we'll call on you. Becca? Oh, sorry.
No, thank you.
Bricks. Becca Cole.
Hi, Becca Cole, RSU 14, point of clarification. Are we following Roberts? I noticed that there was a doc that people can write into. Would you prefer that we do that or do raised hands? I just want to make sure that people get an opportunity to contribute if they don't have their hand raised and are not called on.
Go ahead, Chris.
No, there will be an opportunity, and I'll be going over that in a minute.
No other raised hands for items other than on the agenda. Okay, now we'll move on to Mr. Howell, who will present options for proposed in-person instruction. Mr. Howell.
So thank you, everyone. And it seems like we were just all in the auditorium on August 5th having a discussion about school reopening and what some of the parameters were around that. And so I have prepared a few slides for tonight. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and walk through those, and kind of an opportunity to frame this community conversation about additional opportunities for in-person learning and in-person planning. For those of you who are reading in the newspapers or following the news, the discussion that the board is having tonight, the same discussion is going to be replayed all across the state over the next couple of weeks, and has been played across the state and in other districts that are contiguous to us and districts that are far away from us. And as we move further and further into the pandemic, I think what all of our minds are turning to is that at some point, we will make that turn to start adding additional in-person instruction days. And what does that look like? And what are some of the opportunities? And what are some of the roadblocks? And what are some of the things that we still need to work through? So purpose of my presentation tonight is to provide as much information as possible, and then also give an opportunity for the community to talk a little bit, and then also for the board to ask questions or for additional information. And for those of you who might be interested, this presentation along with the video will be posted at the website as early as we can, so that individuals can peruse it on their own time. So the way I've laid this out is I'll have a chance to do the presentation, and it would be best if we do questions at the end, just because it's easier to follow through. And right now I can't see everyone's screen, so it's a lot easier to do this that way. There'll be an opportunity for public comment. And when we get to that portion, there are some norms and some procedures and protocols we've set tonight, just to make sure we want to have every voice, every person that wants to be heard, that they have that opportunity. And then we'll give the chance for the board to comment, and then also to do deliberations. Also want to point out, and I'll include this again when I finish up my presentation, currently on the RSU 14 website, there's an additional button that's been added for proposed increase in instruction questions. So if someone does not have the opportunity to ask a question tonight, they will have the opportunity to put that there. We will do our best to get those FAQs, those frequently asked questions, up on the website as soon as possible, to make sure not only the board has the information that they need, but the public has the information they need as we work through this important community conversation with where we are in the pandemic. So I do want to bring us back to start to August 5th. And August 5th, we were in the auditorium. And at that time, we were having the opportunity to discuss what would it look like for RSU 14 in the fall at that time. Those of you who remember March very vividly like I do, I think March 13th was our last day of full in-person instruction. And then the spring, we went entirely remote and spent the summer planning. And we were at the time, based on the information that we had and social distancing guidelines and where we felt comfortable as a district, the board had a couple of opportunities to weigh through the safety protocols and other considerations with transportation and food service, and made the determination at that time that it would be best to start within that hybrid schedule. And that's the schedule that we've been operating with since, I think, September 8th was the first day that we opened up school, working on alternating A-Day for Monday, Wednesday, and then Tuesday, Thursday for B-Day cohorts. Friday's been a remote day, with the exception, I think, one day, which was January 22nd, where we did a makeup day for a Monday. We did not open fully, as the green level would suggest there at the bottom. And we did not feel at that time that that was the safe way for us to open as a district. Districts across the state made different decisions, and those decisions were based mostly on two things. One is overall class enrollments, and then building size. And we know, looking across the state, that districts who have enrollments that are dropping and that are working in buildings that have excess capacity, that meeting social distancing guidelines and being able to have more students present in the school has been much easier for them. For districts such as ours that continue to grow, and in some cases have some older buildings, it's more difficult to operate in having more students back. And so again, hybrid makes sense. All right, just want to remind everybody that regardless of whatever decision is made moving forward, the safety protocols that have been put into place by the Department of Health and Human Services, the main CDC, which have then been used to develop the school guidelines by the Maine Department of Education, those don't change. So regardless of whether or not we invite more students in or a current hybrid schedule is kept, these things still need to stay in place. So number one, students and staff must complete a symptom screening checklist before coming to school. That has been the case all year, and purpose behind that obviously is that we do not want students and staff who are ill coming to school with potential spread. The 3 feet of social distancing between students in the classroom, Maine adopted right from the very beginning a different standard than the rest of the country did, with 3 feet between students in the classroom and 6 feet of social distancing between student and adults. Some states went to a strict 6 feet for times in which students are in instruction. Maine did a little different one. And I think one of the ones that has created the greatest amount of challenge for districts across the state has been the 6 feet of social distance when students are unmasked for eating. Our classrooms and our cafeterias, when they were designed, they were not designed for this. So it's been an interesting thing and one of those problems that we've been working to overcome. Medical isolation room established in all buildings away from the nurse's office for possible cases that are taking place. One item which I've been so proud of our students and I think has made the greatest difference in the pandemic that we've been working through is the wearing of masks. And one of the issues that we had talked about all summer was whether or not our students would wear their masks. They've worn their masks and they've done a great job of it. And I truly believe that has been one of the key factors in reducing community spread within our buildings. Proper hand hygiene taught to students and staff members. We have signs all over the place. And then personal protective equipment provided to nurses and staff members who support students closer than 6 feet. And State of Maine has been a wonderful partner. We have received pallets of PPE that the district has not had to purchase through that. And then the last thing, which is this importance of students and staff isolating at home until they're free from symptoms. So regardless of what happens and whether or not there is a change that the board decides to move forward with and the district moves forward with, all of these guidelines must continue to be followed. Other things that have been done throughout the pandemic to improve our facilities. So first of all, signage. We have over 8,000 signs that have been placed in RSU 14 to remind people of traffic patterns, social distancing, hand washing. Every mirror has instructions on how to wash your hands. There has been tremendous investments made in the air filtration systems and the amount of air, fresh outside air that is being circulated through our classrooms has been increased dramatically and in some cases doubled with additional filtration. Additional daytime custodial staff were added. There was a tremendous investment in touchless faucets across the district, along with the washing, the signage. I can remember having conversations last fall and last summer about alcohol-based hand sanitizer and the thousands of gallons I think that we've gone through now. Water fountains have been replaced and those medical isolation rooms that have been done. In nutrition, we have breakfast and lunch being served in classrooms across the district, with the exception at the middle level and high school level where cafeterias and alternate spaces have been used. Students have maintained that 6 feet of social distance while eating breakfast and lunch. So whether it be in the classroom or out in the makeshift cafeterias, Wyndham Middle School has one that is outside of the gym. We have not allowed for shared food, and we've been obviously encouraging students to properly wash their hands and sanitize before eating. And then lastly, our food service, everything has been moved over to prepackaged, individually wrapped, including utensils that have gone to our students. So all these different safety measures have been put into place over the course of this time on our buses. And it's probably one of, other than our schools, it's one of our most visible assets that's out in the community. There's been a buffer layer between bus drivers and the cohorts, empty seats that have been left. We've been currently operating under the model of one student being assigned per row, with the exception of we've had family members, so kids of the same family sitting together. And we have had the good fortune and the blessing of having many parents who have stepped up and who have been willing to transport their students on a daily basis to get them to school. And we are extremely appreciative of them doing that, because otherwise it would have been very difficult to get our students here to school. And then our vans. We have a fleet of 20 plus vans that are out and about in the district. That capacity has been reduced, and it's allowed us to make sure that all of our students who have specialized transportation are able to have that. With that, all that being said, and I'm just going to grab a quick drink of water. Here's where we are as of today. And this is actually fresh as of the notice. I think I sent out it at 5:30 this afternoon. we've had COVID cases, and we have seen times where those cases have spiked, and we've seen some times where there's been a bit of an ebb. And I think all of us were very encouraged that after a little spike after February vacation, beginning into March, we had a little bit of an ebb. But lately, over the last couple of weeks, I have had to report out on a number of cases. And looking historically at other pandemics, what we're following right now for a trajectory of ebbs and flows as we work our way through the pandemic is right spot on with what's happened historically. And just want to thank Pete Small, who's one of our high school social studies teachers, who kind of walked me through the 1918 pandemic and what we saw with that. And interestingly enough, what we're seeing is a similar trend line. So we've had 97 cases in the district. And I think it's important for the community to see this, because those 97 cases have had an impact on RSU 14. They've had an impact on classrooms through the flexibility and the tenaciousness of our tenacity, I guess is the word I should use, of our staff, that buildings have been able to remain open, and that we've been able to provide that in-person instruction. Another item that I've noticed, because obviously I've been following school reopening discussions across the state and across our area, districts that have seen fewer cases have looked to move to reopen a little sooner than districts like ours that have been hit with a greater number of cases. And so currently in the district, we have 73 students that are in quarantine. We have staff that have been impacted by this. So COVID is still very, very real. It's still happening within our district. But again, I am thankful for the work of our staff. And then also I am extremely thankful of all of our nurses across the district in each of the building and the number of hours that they have worked in order to make school successful. And they have done an absolutely tremendous job. I think I saw Matt Bell is on this call, and I know a couple of our nurses are going to be watching tonight. I am extremely thankful for the work that they've done to help us out. We've seen some guidance and some things moving, and it seemed that right around the 1st of, actually end of February vacation and then 1st of March, we started to see some movement at the state level, and specifically in the governor's office with looking at capacities, and a couple big things that happened, which have had an impact on what we've been able to do for in-person instruction. So first of all, February 12th, approval of serial testing for school personnel. It was a big thing for us, because through serial testing, individuals who would have had to have gone to strict quarantining for staffing, because part of the big puzzle and the trying to remain and have schools open is whether or not you have enough staff. And so through serial testing, we are able to test staff members who want to be on a daily basis. And as long as they're testing negative, and these are staff members who may have been identified as a close contact, through that testing, it's allowed them to come back to work. And through our staff members willing to go through this process, we've been able to stay open on many days. We all saw the big announcement on March 3rd, and I think we were in a board meeting at the time, but availability of vaccination for school-based staff aligned with a federal directive. That was a surprise to many of us, because we really thought, based on the age-based designations that have been set originally by the governor, we did not expect our staff to be even have the availability of the vaccine until late May, early June. And through that directive, it allowed our staff members to have access to that. I think something that's discussed in the community and that we often forget about is that many of the vaccinations are a 2-dose vaccination, so it's multiple weeks for them to take place. The other thing that's important for everyone to remember is that all the vaccinations are approved as experimental vaccinations, and there's no requirement. We cannot legally require, we cannot legally ask whether or not somebody is choosing to go through that vaccination. So it has been something that was a bit of a surprise and has been helpful to us. But in addition, we also have had some additional changes by the governor, specifically for indoor and outdoor gathering capacities. And as of March 26, which was just this past Friday, indoor gathering capacities increased to 50% of capacity. For schools, which were operating under a 50-person limit in a room, we now move to 50% of capacity and meeting all the social distancing guidelines. And then outdoor gathering capacity increased to 75%. On May 24th, coming forward, indoor gathering capacity increases to 75% of total capacity. Again, those requirements need to be met. And then outdoor gathering capacity increases to 100%. It is through this guidance that we are now looking at, and Principal Karen at Windham High School is looking at the possibility of a in-person graduation at the Cross Arena with those capacity increases that are happening. So we're starting to see some movement with that, and whether or not that movement is due to vaccination, whether or not that movement is just to COVID fatigue, but we're starting to see some things that are opening up a little bit. So let's kind of transition here into what some of the planning that the administrative team has been working on and other groups across the district have been discussing. So number one, they've been looking at daily schedules and whether or not the daily schedule that is currently in place, if the district were to move from a hybrid to greater in person, would there have to be changes to the daily schedule to accommodate all the different classes that need to take place, breakfast and lunch for students. So they've been looking at that. They've also been looking at serving. So where's breakfast going to take place? Where would lunch take place if we increase our capacities? They've been looking at social distancing requirements and going out and looking at classrooms, looking at class capacities. The original capacities that were done on each of the classrooms were done based upon 6 feet of social distancing and a larger group. And then with a reduced capacity, do we have the capacity in each of the classrooms to make sure? And if not, do we need to look at alternate spaces or alternate plans for classes? But looking at that class capacity, we are not looking at transitioning students from class to class. We are looking to keep classes intact. Special education services. So within the model, right now we're set up in a hybrid with alternating days, making sure that we're meeting the needs of everyone in special education, making sure their IEPs met, looking at the scheduling, looking at the daily transitions within the building. And that varies whether or not you're in an elementary school, a middle school, an intermediate school, or a high school. The number of transitions and things that happen. Looking at duties, and do we have enough duty personnel in order to be able to cover everything that we need to? Transportation, can we transport our students within the current model and within our current configurations? And then also, every building has its own special consideration because every building has a little different enrollment. And especially in Windham and Raymond, where we have different size buildings, different size capacities, every building's a little bit unique. And so taking a look at all those special considerations, and our administrative team has been doing some individual planning to look at what does this look like in their building, and can they meet all these requirements, and looking at trying to plan and what is it that we can do and what are the options that are possible. So the administrative team worked this week. They've been working for the last couple of weeks and looking at several options. And I know the agenda tonight said looking at 2 options. After our meeting on Tuesday, I think it's important that I offer out a 3rd option. And I think that 3rd option is a little bit more doable for us based on some of the constraints that we had. And again, as you work through some of the larger things and then work down to the nitty gritty and all the individual elements, some things become apparent that you need to work through. So one option, which is an alternating Friday option, adding Fridays as an instructional day. So currently it's a remote day, so an in-person instructional day within the hybrid model. And so within this, students would remain in cohorts. A-day students would go one week, B-day students would go another week. And so it would alternate 3 days one week, 2 days the other, between the A's and the B's for the remainder of the school year. Just some positive things for this is that it does limit the impact to transportation. We'd be running the same bus runs, running the same students. We would need some additional time to adjust student support schedules because we do have students who are receiving services currently on the Friday when everyone else is remote, making sure that those needs are met. Wouldn't require any adjustments to daily building schedules. And it does present some staffing challenges. And actually all three options that I'm going to talk about tonight do present some challenges, and not so much at the middle school and high school to start. Let me just first of all address the elementary level. Board members, you remember that the elementary schools have been built on, it's a 4.5-day week schedule, but it's not really a half day on that Wednesday. It's a shortened day on that Wednesday. And so all of our part-time individuals have hours that represent not a full week, which does present some challenges for us. In order to be able to stay open this year, in order to be able to maintain building schedules and to make sure that all services have met, many of those part-time people, we have used up all of their working hours on the in-person days, and they would not be available for hours on the Friday. So it would require some schedule changes, and it would also require us to take a look at how are we using our part-time employees on the other days, just to make sure that all of the services that we're looking at, to make sure that they're covered. So that's one option. And I know there's some districts around us that have looked at this for specific buildings and not all of their buildings, but it allows you to maintain within that cohort and allows you to maintain current class sizes and where we are. I'm going to move on to another option. And within option 2, this would be in-person instruction 5 days a week. The only way that we can look at this option is based upon where we are currently with numbers and in current enrollment. Right now across the district in grades K to 8, I think the last time I looked, we have 332 students that are 100% remote and are accessing that remote program, which is reducing our overall populations in the classrooms. Within any sort of model beyond the hybrid, we would have to set classroom capacities, and we would only be able to bring students in. So those would be remote students who would want to return, or homeschool students who want to return, whether or not we would have the space for them. And every classroom space has different challenges with different capacities. And part of this plan, we would have to work through that. We would require, and we would need, in order for this to work, a continued commitment from the parents who've been transporting their kids to school. We have some capacity on the buses, but for those that are doing that, that's one thing that's helping us. It's also important to note that within this model, that bus capacities would have to increase. This is just, there's no other way around it beyond the current 1 student per seat, and it's a recommendation. We would have to run with all the windows down on the buses, and some buses would need to run 2 students in a seat. That's the only way that we would be able to get students to school who would be required of transportation. Some buildings would need to have a modified day in order to be able to accommodate student spacing and classroom instructional needs. An example of that is Wyndham High School. Wyndham High School would need to use a couple cafeteria spaces for classroom use, especially for a couple of their larger classes where there are some, I don't want to call them anomalies, but classes that run out of the usual would have to use those spaces, which would make it very difficult to turn over spaces for lunches. Within this model, we would have to look at an early dismissal for the high school with a grab-and-go lunch in order to be able to accommodate, and then providing opportunity for remediation and credit recovery in the afternoon for students. And within this model, and this is as we work through some discussions in A-Team on Tuesday, the administrative team, we start to run into some transportation and staffing issues for consistent programming. And specifically, it really hits us on Fridays. And on Fridays, because of a partial elementary day that would need to take place, and then a partial high school day, and then a middle school day, and then a regular dismissal. We would have to feed students at the elementary level almost an hour and a half into school. We would be running constant lunches, and then we would be turning around and dismissing. In addition, we would be running into some issues with our part-time staff with being able to cover, because we do not have them for the hours necessary in order to be able to cover those Fridays and for that consistent student programming. So presents some challenges for us, specifically for transportation and staffing that would be difficult for us to overcome. So with that being said, I want to throw out another option tonight, which is option 3 for a 4-day model. And within this model, that would be a Monday through Thursday model. It would overcome the Friday transportation staffing issues that we'd be running into. So much like that 5-day per week model, preference given to students who are currently enrolled in the hybrid model, to the extent that we could have students having remote or homeschool students, but we would have to be working under some strict capacities. And again, going back to, we have 332 students at the K-8 level, and I believe we have about another 100 students at the high school level who are fully remote. For those groups to return would be difficult. We would also run into some difficulties for students who wanted to go from hybrid to full remote, and we'd have to look at some alternative models for remote instruction. And when I say alternative models, they'd be alternative for RSU 14, but they would not be alternative to what other districts around us have offered. And specifically, that would be a software-based model. Again, we would require a continued commitment from parents. Buses would need to run with windows down. Some buses would need to run 2 students per seat. We do have some bus runs right now that could accommodate A and B day cohorts and still have 1 student per seat, but we do have several runs where that would not be the case, and we need to run the numbers. It's allowable under what we have for guidance, but our practice has been the modified day for some buildings. Again, what this does do is it eliminates the staffing and transportation issues created by the 5-day model. And specifically, one transportation issue, which I forgot to also mention, the 5-day, is our vocational students and the transportation that's provided to them. So that would be an option 3. Also within what we've talked about, and I think there was a chance to have some conversation last week, and I know there'll be some questions tonight. If we were to move forward with adding additional in-person time, when is the best time to start? We know that at some point we need to be back, and the board will have the opportunity of the conversation. Does it make sense to do it this year, or does it make sense to move it into next year? As far as a starting date, if it were to be done with this year, May 10th makes the most sense. And I just want to go through why May 10. So number one, we have the goal and the aim to keep our schools open. The last thing that I want is if we transition to more in person and then all of a sudden we have to have more kids in remote. I want to do everything possible that I can in order to make sure that doesn't happen. So by May 10, any staff who've chosen to be vaccinated will be fully vaccinated, and they will have the opportunity at that point to be able to work their way out of quarantine. We also have experienced over the last couple vacations a post-vacation surge. We know we have families that are traveling this upcoming April vacation, the weeks before and during the week, not only out of state, across the country, but out of the country. And we know these transitions have brought additional cases that our building administrators and teachers and support staff have had to work through. The high school instructional calendar, Principal Karen has been running an alternating set of days for, or alternating blocks for even and odd. And so that would actually be the next break. We also know if this is the direction that the district decides to move forward with, we need to provide some professional time for our staff to work on classrooms, to make sure that they're fully equipped, that they have everything they need in order to make that transition. This would provide some days after the break in order for that to happen. I have read through models of districts where instead of this, they've actually chosen to shut down for periods of time for this to happen. I would prefer that we stay in the hybrid during any transition, and that we give some Fridays time, or give Fridays following vacation to staff so that they can make that transition. And in addition, right now, we are in an upward trajectory for cases over the last couple of days. Provides a little additional time for case reduction in order for that to take place, because it is a trend that we're seeing. I think I have reported out on just as many cases over the last 2 weeks as I did during late February when we had a little bit of a surge. And again, looking at a model, we do not want to create a model where we end up with more remote instruction and greater loss in instructional days. So a couple of considerations that I think it's important for everyone to know, and I want everyone to be informed as the community has this conversation and mulls through this. Options 2 and 3 will create larger class sizes, which anytime you have larger class sizes, this creates the potential for larger quarantines of students. At the elementary level, and at the elementary level, this would mean whole classes would need to quarantine. At the middle level, typically this would then have an impact on teams, and so the entire team would need to quarantine. At the high school level, and high schools are an interesting group to try to work through in a pandemic with students changing classes. You end up with quarantines of classes because you have a student who would go from class to class to class going through. Options 2 and 3 reduce any built-in buffers for contact tracing. So one thing that we have had this year is that on an A day, so if we got a call today is an A day, so got a call on an A day that we need to quarantine some B day students, we would have some time today to work through that. Again, if that's something that would happen in the future, I just want the community to know that if the district moves to opening more fully, chances are we would need to close the school for a day while contact tracing took place to make sure that everyone who needs to be notified is notified. And in addition, in options 2 and 3, moving forward with any sort of additional in-person, we need some time for cohorts to adjust to each other and time for them to rebuild, because for our classroom teachers, this would mean that they're starting the school year because they have 2 classes that have been operating independently of each other throughout the year. And so they would need some time built into that as they work through the end of the year. So some next steps for us is that we need to do planning as a district. SEL stands for social emotional learning. We have groups of students and staff who have been through a pandemic, and there are impact of a pandemic not on just where we are as far as bodies in a classroom, but just even students getting used to the idea of being back full in a classroom. Repurposing of school spaces to accommodate programming. So in some buildings need to look at what we do for the gym, cafeteria, and classroom spaces. The high school has been using has just started piloting a text contact tracing feature to make sure that if we do go forward and we're going ahead and doing contact tracing, that we have that opportunity to notify people first electronically and then follow up with a phone call. We have some storage challenges where some classrooms where things are going to need to be emptied out in order to be able to accommodate students. Some furniture reallocation. Many of our elementary classrooms have moved to tables, and we have desks and storage, and things are going to need to be moved around in order to accommodate. We need some time for room setup and rearranging furniture, preparing for additional students, that delivery of furniture. And we also need to set up that if there are students who say, you know what, I was in a hybrid, I'd like to go remote, that those software-based platforms, that those things are ready to go, and we make sure that students are properly enrolled in that. some curriculum planning, and then some route development for transportation. Where I'm at personally, I just want to make sure that where I'm at personally to this is that I would like to see us have the opportunity to transition to some more in-person instruction. I don't feel at this time that I can recommend a 5-day because of some of the challenges, but to look at a 4-day where as long as we can make sure that we have students in, and in addition that we have a further reduction in cases that are not going to impact us and set us behind. So that the last thing we want to do is open up and then have to go remote. So to make sure that we have that. A May 10th date gives us a little bit of time in order to be able to see where cases go and whether or not we see that continued retreat. But as I've been thinking quite a bit about this over the last months and talking to other districts who, because of their case counts or other, what's the word that I'm looking for? Other challenges with distancing that they've been able to, they've not had the same challenges of us. It has made a difference for them when they've brought students back and that they've been able to have those classrooms come back together. And lastly, for me, and just looking at transitioning, I want to make sure as a district that RSU 14 is fully prepared to have all students back in the fall. And this provides an opportunity for us to make sure that we have everything right for that fall transition. And so planning purposes and making sure that our students' needs are being met. We want to make sure that we're comfortable, want to make sure that we're meeting all of our guidelines because we have as a district been faithful to meeting and not skimping on those guidelines as we've worked throughout the pandemic. But I know that there's going to need to be some additional support. And I know that there's going to need to be some discussion, and there's some of that discussion will start tonight as far as what the community feels best to move forward. But just know that we're preparing for what's going to work. And we're also preparing for welcoming our students and making sure that whatever model that their needs are being met as we move forward in the pandemic. There's helpful information that's coming out as far as vaccines for those families who want to do that. I think I saw something today where within Pfizer is looking at younger grades, which could have a big impact. You know, if I have my crystal ball, I think we'll still be wearing masks in the fall, whether or not social distancing guidelines are in place. But again, I just want to make sure that we are fully prepared to welcome all of our students back. And so with that, I'm just going to go ahead and just talk about public comment, because I know there's some individuals who would like to come and talk tonight and share their thoughts for the board. And we want to make sure that everyone has heard and has that opportunity. So first of all, we are going to be using virtual hands. And if you have never used this process, if you go down to the bottom of Zoom and go to reactions, there is a raised hand portion that's there. That's how you can signify. We're going to be doing our best to call on participants in the order of which their hands were raised. And if we miss somebody, please make sure that you let us know if we're missing your hand, but we'll do our best. And we have a couple of people monitoring for that. We're also asking, given the number of people on the Zoom call tonight, that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. And then also that you limit your comments to focusing on in-person learning and, you know, models or options on in-person learning, but specific personnel comments, they're not appropriate for the setting. That's more appropriate on a one-on-one conversation. So with that, I think that's it. So we're going to go back to, this will be our chance for public comment. The board will have a chance to deliberate, and then obviously anybody who doesn't get a chance to get their comments tonight has the opportunity to add those comments or add their ideas later. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. And Mrs. Bricks, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. I have no screen, so I don't know what, once you clicked, everybody disappeared. But Right now, we'd like to entertain public comment, as Chris discussed. If you can find that little button and have your hand raised. I have two folks helping me, Christine Frostburton-A and Kate Levier, who are keeping track of who comes first, who comes second, and we'll call on you. As Chris mentioned, you have 3 minutes, given the number of people who are on the Zoom, to make sure that everybody has a chance to speak. I really want to thank, first of all, everybody who has attended tonight. It really means a lot to us to hear your voices and what your thoughts are. We seriously contemplate every single comment, and that will inform our decision. So with that, I will turn it over to my esteemed helpers to guide us through this.
At this time, Ms. Brooks, I do not see hands raised, but we'll give some time.
Okay, well, there you are. We have.
Okay, Ms. Brooks, we have an Alicia Piper or Pieper. I'm not sure how to pronounce her name, but she is ready.
I just wanted to say thank you to all of you working so hard in RSU 14. I work in another school district, and it seems like a very well laid out plan. And also I appreciate seeing the possibility of doing 3 days, and doing that alternating Friday would work great. So I just really, I like how the thoughtfulness that went into this. I'm of course loving your plan way better than another district. So I just want to just say thank you for making it very clear, and look forward to being able to do more days in the classroom.
Thank you, Alicia.
Ms. Brooks, we have Kay.
Hello. I just wanted to first thank you for allowing me the chance to speak and share my voice on this matter. I have actually written something to share because public speaking is not my thing. So first, I would like to speak as a parent. I strongly urge you to consider continuing the hybrid model of instruction for the remainder of the 2021 school year. I too want my children back to school 5 days a week. I have a middle school child who has struggled with the hybrid model. She has a 504 plan due to both ADHD and anxiety. We've had to recruit a high school student to come over on her off days to help keep her focused and complete her assignments. She misses her friends and the social interaction with peers. My spouse has had to work from home 3 days a week so our children can be supervised. I also have a child at the primary school who has done surprisingly well and is intrinsically motivated to do her classwork without any hesitation. My children have been through various transitions and changes throughout this pandemic, and I think creating another change with only a month of school left will lead to increased anxiety. I worry that one or both of my children could potentially need to quarantine more often if this is the case. Currently, if B-Day students have to quarantine at this point, my children are still able to attend in-school person on opposite days. This would not be the case if we bring children all together. I took the time to talk to both of my kids and ask what they would prefer if they had the choice. And without hesitation, they both expressed that they would rather keep the schedule they have and start fresh next year with hopefully less restrictions and clear expectations. Next, I would like to speak as an educator. I have been appalled at the discussions and comments that have been made on social media. I know firsthand teachers have poured blood, sweat, and tears into creating a safe environment for students while focusing on relationships, communication, flexibility, patience, all while continuing to balance academic expectations and demands. Teachers want to have students back full time, and maybe if there were 4 to 5 months left, that would be more realistic. Unfortunately, with approximately 24 days of school left, if this were to happen, it would create turmoil for everyone. Teachers, administrators, union leaders, and school board members have been attacked, blamed, ridiculed, and accused of having some sort of hidden agenda. Why not channel all of this energy, effort, and time into establishing a solid plan for returning 5 days in the fall of the 21-22 school year? The decision has divided the community and school when ultimately it needs to be united for the children of RSU 14. I'd personally like to thank all the teachers and staff who have made my children feel safe, continue to promote social emotional well-being, and have gone above and beyond to provide communication. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kay.
Ms. Brooks, we have Melissa Cucinotta. I hope I said that correctly.
You did, thank you. I just wanted to support what Kay just said. I also agree with, I guess, option 4, which would be to not make any changes with what would end up being a month left of school. I feel that with the transition, it would cause an increase in anxiety in a lot of the children and a lot of the teachers. I feel like what Mr. Howell said with the focus being on social emotional well-being of the staff and the students, I just don't see that as supporting that at that time. I feel like if you want to focus on the social emotional well-being of the students, you need to consider what that huge change is going to do to these kids after an entire year of them just kind of settling in to a routine. And although I can empathize with parents wanting to have their kids back in school, I feel like with what's going to turn out to be a month left of school, if you go with option 1, you're talking about 2 extra days of school, being every other Friday for a month. That's 2 extra days of school, really. And then the other option, you're cramming kids onto a bus with windows down when, what if it's raining and it just seems like there's way more problems than it really seems worth it to me. And I feel like it's just creating more stress on top of stress for these teachers and for the bus drivers, and just more stress in a world where we don't need more stress. And I just think that, the kids will do okay if we start fresh next year the best we can. I don't think we need to end this year trying to get ready for next year. I think we need to end this year on a positive note. If you put the 2 cohorts together to end this year, elementary school teachers are going to be wasting an entire month of school because they're going to be spending the last month of school getting those 2 cohorts used to being together. So it's going to be a month of learning lost because they're going to be just training those groups of kids to be together. And it just doesn't seem like it's time well spent. And so I guess I'm in favor of keeping it the same, just like Kay's children said. And hopefully, and again, I appreciate all the hard work everyone's put into it. I know it's not easy. I'm an educator in another district as well, and I really appreciate all of the educators in RSU 14, and hopefully we can do what's best for them and for the kids.
Thank you, Melissa.
Ms. Brooks, Adam Rogers.
Hi there. I don't think I can put it any more eloquently than the last 2, but again, want to echo their thoughts that I think it's best just to leave it alone. I have a child in the Manchester school, also the middle school, and I have a wife who's also a teacher at one of the schools. And I can tell you firsthand that the amount that the teachers would do to make whatever plan you come up with work is insane. I have no doubt they'd give up their April vacations. I have no doubt they'd spend, on a normal year, they spend 2 weeks in their classroom before school even starts. So to do this now, they're going to spend at least that, if not more, to try to make things work. And they will make it work because they're resilient and that's what they do. But to do this all for a month's worth of time seems kind of crazy to me. I can appreciate wanting to do it now to kind of see what the fall might look like. But that being said, as we know, the rules change every 2 weeks or so. And what we're doing now may or may not, most likely will not work come fall time. So I think we kind of throw that out the window a little bit. I also work as a firefighter paramedic, and I work in one of the vaccine clinics, and we're making huge strides with the vaccines. Maine is very receptive to the vaccine. Come fall, we're going to be real close, I think, to about 70%, give or take, of the entire state being vaccinated. The other thing that I would hate, as Mr. Howell alluded to, is We go back to school, we do this, we say, yeah, we're going to go 4 days. That's great. And then we run into quarantines, and now we're pulling kids out of school and we're causing more turmoil. And as much as I would love to have my kids back in school 5 days a week, and believe me, I would, I just don't think that it's worth the amount of effort and hassle that it's going to be for the short amount of gain of a month's time or so. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Brooks, Carol Leonard.
I think you're muted.
Yes, I am. Sorry about that.
Welcome to my world.
Yeah. Oh, I do telehealth all day, so I'm familiar with this. I have a high schooler, and my husband also is a teacher. And I'm curious. I have a number of questions, actually. First of all, I want to applaud the previous 3 speakers, 4, who, thank you guys. I agree completely. I think it is relatively absurd to attempt full in-person at this point. I'm curious, who is pushing for full in-person? Where is this initiative coming from? I'd love to see the data on what percentage of parents actually want this. I'd love to see the data on what percentage of kids actually want this. It seems to me virtually impossible to pull off at the high school. My thought is, if it is possible in the other schools, I don't see why the high school and the younger kids have to be running the same program, and that might help the busing thing. But with having been in the high school in previous years, when they're changing classes, there's no way you're not going to have massive contamination and end up with massive amounts of kids either sick, potentially fatally. And this is something I really want to emphasize. They say kids don't get as sick. My child has already spent 2 full weeks, 6 months apart, in the hospital due to collapsed lungs. Some of the kids are vulnerable to complications and potentially dying from COVID. On the other hand, keeping him home is affecting his mental health in a substantial way. Hybrid works. Why are we trying to mess with it? The idea of trying to use this as a test run for next year, as the previous speaker said, the rules are changing constantly. By next year, hopefully the numbers will be down due to the percentage of people in Maine vaccinated. And I don't want my kid or my husband being guinea pigs for next year. That is not logical from a scientific point of view. And finally, the increased anxiety amongst the entire staff and all the kids. So far, of the people I've talked to, which is a fair number, all of them have expressed massively increased anxiety at the idea of trying to go back for 1 month. I strongly urge everybody to stay the course, possibly do the every other Friday. That seems the least disruptive. So again, the questions are, who's pushing for this, and where's the data on percentage of parents and students who actually want full in-person versus hybrid? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carol.
Ms. Brooks, John Gagnon.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. New to Zoom, that's for sure. Appreciate your time and taking a minute to just hear my thoughts. Just a parent here in Windham, and we're definitely in favor of you guys reopening the schools as soon as possible. So option 2, I'd encourage you guys to exercise that option. If it doesn't happen now, we definitely want to see it for the fall. We believe our kids' education is the most important thing that can be given to our students and our children. We want them back in school as soon as possible. The transmission rates with COVID from the ages of 0 to 15 are extremely low. I don't know the number offhand, and I don't want to state it because I'm not sure what it is. And I believe the transmission from 15 to 18 years old is extremely low as well, almost next to none. And I'm also curious if Superintendent Howell has any stat on how many cases, COVID cases, have been transmitted inside the school. You said you had 97 cases, but I would guess a lot of those are community spread cases. Thank you guys for taking some time. Appreciate it. And I think we can work through this and get our kids back into school. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Nice job on the Zoom.
Ms. Brooks, Natasha Scott.
Hello, I am an educator as well. I work with special needs children 5 days a week, all day long. And we have put in multiple precautions, just like you guys have, to make sure that the standards have been met for kids. I actually have 2 kids in the Windham Primary School. One of them is fully remote due to her mother's choices, and my daughter herself is hybrid model, and she goes to daycare the other 3 days a week. I am pushing for you guys to try to open for at least 4 days a week. I really love the idea of the 4 day a week and the Friday off. I believe that the social emotional piece of the children has been completely diminished since not being a part of their community. I believe that while they are still being able to be a part of their classes, they're not getting the full effect of it. I remember going to school, and that was my favorite part of my day, getting on the bus and going to school, seeing all my friends, seeing my teachers. Even if it wasn't about just the educational piece, it's that social piece that a lot of them are missing. And the educational piece too, I feel like while you guys have done an amazing job with the hybrid model, I feel that a lot of the elementary school kids are struggling and becoming behind because the work they are getting is not necessarily what they would be getting when they were in the classes. They wouldn't be getting the full effect of full instruction every day. I'm sure many parents like myself are on top of their learning, making sure that they're getting stuff done as required by the teacher. But not all of us parents are teachers. We're doing the absolute best that we can. But I think once we return to full instruction next year, if that is what happens, we're gonna see a big decrease in what the children have been able to uphold over the past year since COVID has hit. Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha.
Ms. Brooks, I don't see any hands right now. We'll pause for a moment if you're okay with that.
Sure. Love to hear from somebody else if you have some thoughts you want to share with us.
And Ms. Brooks, just as a reminder also, we do have that questions link on the website, and it is live. I checked to make sure it was working okay. We have, I see Becky Woodbury.
Hi, I got more of a question. I mean, with parents not wanting to go back into school and stay with a hybrid model, it seems like there's enough time for them to opt out and to maintain a hybrid model while still allowing people to go back 4 days a week. I mean, is that being discussed, or is that not an option on the table?
Chris, can you answer that?
At this time, it's not currently discussed. It would be very difficult for our classroom teachers to be able to manage having kids that are in partial time, full time, and remote at the same time. It's a great question. It's actually one that we've discussed.
Ms. Brooks, Rebecca Cole.
Hi, Ms. Brooks, I'll defer to the Clarkies.
Okay, thank you.
Clarkies?
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, sorry, my husband made that our name. My name is Christina Clark, and I have a son who is a kindergartner at the primary school. My son has autism and has an IEP, and I was wondering if it was at all on the table or thought of that children with IEPs be able to go back for 4 days a week. Because I know only some children are allowed to be there 4 days a week, but my son has experienced a lot of anxiety from not having a consistent schedule and being able to adapt fully to a school schedule. So I was wondering if that was an option for children, all children with an IEP, to be able to go to a fully in-person schedule, not being 5 days, but maybe just all being able to do the 4 days a week. Thank you.
Chris, I don't know whether that's you or Lisa.
I'm going to actually defer to Lisa, and I know Lisa is on this call.
Yep.
So we would need to have a conversation about that, Chris. That's not an option that we've put on the table. There would be, so far, for those of the public that don't know, for our 4-day students that have come, and there were some guidelines that we set back in August based on CDC guidance. So if we were to consider a specific group of population coming, we would need to really talk about that a little bit further, particularly for students who spend the majority of time in the regular ed classroom. If we were to stay, say, with the hybrid model and then bring these students back on extra days, they would then be, I'm assuming we would be mixing cohorts on those days. So happy to have the conversation, but it would need to be a broader discussion to include our team members about the impact of what that would be broadly.
Thank you, Lisa.
We have Dean.
I just want to echo the comments of the lack of a consistent schedule has greatly impacted learning this year, and the hybrid model for us has not effectively worked. The differences with some of the instructional methods and the bouncing back and forth days has really impacted our ability to get that consistency. And I think even though it's a short period of time, our best bet is to go back for a 4 or 5 day model, just so that we can prepare ourselves for what's going to come in the fall and deal with some of the fallout of that schedule change now. It's really been a very troubling and effective year for us in the hybrid model.
Thank you, Dean. I don't see any hands. Okay, there's one.
Rebecca Cole.
Hi, thank you for your patience. I just wanted to make sure that the parents in the community had an opportunity to speak, but I will just offer this. I'm Rebecca Cole. I do teach first grade at Wyndham Primary School, and I'm a former parent of children in the district. Thank you to all the expressions of support that have been offered up here this evening. It is not just a job, it's truly a relationship that can't be replicated. And the fact that it's such an important issue, I think, speaks to that. It is absolutely our deepest wish to have all of our students back with us when it is safe. And I just wanted to, again, thank the community, not only for their support here on this call, but over the last year. Plus now, as it turns out, it's almost April, as we all try to navigate this together, and for all of the reasons that were stated in some of the testimony here this evening. We do appreciate your consideration, not only for us as staff members, but for the impact of this decision on all of the children in RSU 14. So thank you.
Thank you, Becca.
Tom Goblieski.
Unmute. Yeah, thanks. I'm not going to say much more than I appreciate what you all are facing. I don't know most of the challenges that you're dealing with. But I would just speak broadly and generally to encourage you as strongly as possible that I think that it's in the student's best interest to those who are comfortable and able to be in school as much as absolutely possible. Again, I'm sure you're dealing with all sorts of issues that I'm not familiar with, but any way we can try to get to yes, and any opportunity that you can provide for those who feel that they need it for one reason or the other, we would strongly encourage you to do that, because our children are suffering badly, and we've been fortunate that our home situation is actually pretty good compared to a lot of friends. But on behalf of the few people around town that I do know, that people are having a very, very hard time, and so whatever you can do to help would be very appreciated.
Thank you, Tom, for your comments.
Now, I apologize if I mispronounced your last name. Ms. Brooks, we have Jen.
Welcome, Jen.
Hi, so the last name's Bella. But I just wanted, I have 2 kids at Wyndham High School. And my younger son has not done well with the hybrid model. He's just an in-person learning type of student. My oldest has been fine. He's fine no matter what the situation. But that being said, I would not risk his safety or the safety of any other students to have him back on a full-time basis. And I just don't think we're ready for that. The list of to-dos to have that happen that the superintendent listed was awfully long. And I would rather see the district take the time over the summer to get all those things done and in place so that my kids can return safely come the fall. Again, I don't think the 1 month of school, the number of in-person days that would actually total outweighs the risk involved in having that many students in close contact and the bus and things other people have mentioned. Thank you.
I don't see any other hands, do you?
It looks like Alicia has put her hand.
Alicia, I'm sorry. There you are.
Yes, I just want to make sure people understand, excuse me, that yes, I love the idea of like get our kids in more. It's easier when they're younger. I think this is something that maybe some parents don't understand is when kids are younger, it's easier in terms of staffing to have kids that want to be in person, and then have staff that can do the remote teaching, because a younger age, they're teaching all topics. Where when the hard part is you get into the older grades, teachers are certified for specific topic areas. They're not all doing the same type of math. Like there might be a math teacher in the high school level that they strictly do algebra. That's all they do. They don't do other topics. So I think it's something to just remind parents of some of this part of teachers and what teachers do. And depending on age range, that's going to play a role in how much can the school open. So I just want to put that out there as a reminder.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We'd love to hear from anybody else. If there's somebody that I can't see in all the multiple pages. Again, if this, oh, excellent.
Ryan Randall.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for taking my question. Just any considerations about the possibility of a 4th surge that they've been discussing recently on the news and whatnot, and when that might take place, whether it be this fall or any concerns about that going into the next year. Also, have I know you've been, Mr. Howell, you've been speaking to the other districts. Has anybody been looking at national trends as far as kids going back to school and what's been happening with schools shutting down, or numbers of kids getting sick because of the virus? Just questions to see if everything is taken into consideration before a determination is made whether the students go back semi full-time or full-time. Thank you.
Ms. Brooks, I'll take a couple of those. So first of all, Brian, yes, I mean, every day I pay attention to COVID statistics and obviously have been living some of what we've been dealing through the pandemic as I work with all of our buildings to make sure that we're staying open. When we first started school reopening conversations back in March, we were seeing case declines, and I think we were in the 70s for daily cases. We're now back up in the 250s. So we know we're seeing a little bit of an increase with that. I think what's interesting for us here in Maine is that we see national news on school reopenings. When national news is discussing school reopenings, they're talking about what Maine has done all year with even getting kids back into any sort of a schedule being in school, not because those kids have been out for a year, fully remote without any in-person. Maine has really led the way and I think it's also being used as a model in other states for how to safely reopen schools. So the question really becomes for when is the timing right to add additional?
Thank you. Thank you, Brian.
Ms. Brooks, Natasha Scott.
I'm just going to bounce off of what Alicia said with the high school and the elementary school differences. Has there been any talk about possibly opening the younger schools to make that able and keeping the high schools and middle schools where they're at due to the exposure of crossing in hallways?
Mr. Howell?
I'll just share, we've talked through all sorts of scenarios. And I think part of what we're trying to look at now is just what is best. And I agree with you, Natasha, that what is best for high school may be different for an elementary school. And I think in some of our reopening planning has been looking at even differing schedules to make sure that we're meeting those unique needs.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you, Natasha.
Jessica Bridges.
Hi there. Thank you for taking my comments. I just first of all want to say thank you so much for everything you guys have done. I work in urgent care, so I signed up for this, whereas a lot of people did not. I have two kids in primary school. One's in second grade. She was having issues with social issues and being able to talk in front of classes, and Mrs. Cole actually got her to open up and then the pandemic hit, and she actually is still having issues. She's finally starting to open up. The only thing I urge is, maybe a Friday is great, but opening up and having them get all these new kids and new faces for 1 month before you guys close is really difficult for them. Especially for the younger ones who are not used to it. Also working in urgent care, we're seeing, more cases when it comes to sports, when it comes to all those other things. And I have seen kids have it. So I know that the transmission is there. And it's a tough thing to see when you see a bunch of Wyndham people coming in and you're just like, oh crap, we're going to be closed down. But because they do at least need those 2 days a week for now. Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. We'd love to hear from anybody else if you're willing. Excellent.
Megan's iPhone.
Hi, I have a child in the primary schools, and she's on a 504 plan, and so the switch between hybrid back to full-time would really put a huge burden on that, including the already big challenge of adjusting for 1 month. So I'd like to echo what some others have said about, it seems like in disproportionate risk to send everybody back to full-time or nearly full-time with such a small amount of school left. Of course, I'm looking from my own perspective of my child who has already accommodations. She would have even more, and that would put a lot on her teachers and the school. And so we feel that it would probably be a good idea to keep the hybrid until the end of the year and then hopefully go back to full-time in the fall. Thank you.
Megan, I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Ms. Brooks, we have Carol Leonard.
Hi, I'm Dan Wirtz. I'm a science teacher at the high school. I just wanted to bring up one more point of order. That is, in my science room, even though my square footage is actually quite huge, I don't actually have that much place for desks that are 3 feet apart because of lab benches and things like that. So a lot of the estimations of how many kids could fit in my classroom that we got last fall were based on total empty square footage, like you were looking at the ceiling. And the entire upstairs of the 2 science wings at the high school don't take into account any of the lab benches. So I wouldn't be able to actually have both my cohorts in the same room at the same time and still keep even the 3 foot spacing. I already have that right now, and they just fit. I can hold 12. But actually 2 of my classes, it would bump up to 18 and 20, and then I would have no room for them.
Thank you for your comments. Anybody else? We would love to hear from you. This is important for us to get a pulse. Just know that if this isn't your comfort zone, which it isn't for a lot of people, to speak, that's why we provided a place on our website. There's a button on the front page. You just click it and you can pose your question. It's pretty easy to access. The administration will be accumulating those questions and putting them in a format that we will share not only with the board, but with the public so that you can see. So you have another option if this isn't, oh, Melissa, there you are.
Yeah, I just had a couple questions about the transportation. If we go to option 2 or 3, Superintendent Howell presentation said that there would possibly be 2 kids to a seat. Just to clarify, would it be 2 kids per seat or per row? And then a follow-up question, if our kid was to be on one of those bus routes, would you notify us so that we could have the option of transporting them if that was the case in that situation? Thank you.
It's a great question, and it would have to be there would be some rows on those buses where there would be not just 2 students in a row, but there might be 2 students in 1 seat. It's allowable under the guidelines with windows open. And I, again, want everyone to have all the information. If that's a direction to head into, that would be something we would need to do in order to get all the kids to school.
Ms. Brooks, we have Nicolette.
Welcome.
Hello, how is everybody? I'm just coming into the meeting after Girl Scouts and a trip to Hannaford and Wendy's. Generally being a part of society again is wonderful. I'm of the opinion that we need to come back and return to some sort of normalcy for the mental health of our children. My daughter is in 1st grade and she goes twice a week, Monday and Wednesday. And the other 3 days, there is no, quote, remote learning. YouTube is not a teacher. She has gained significant weight at the beginning of the quarantine and everything. Her personality kind of changed. She became very inward and introverted, and she's normally quite a boisterous, funny, loving kid. I think masks have been proven to work. We're washing our hands, we're covering our mouths. If you're sick, stay home. If you want to rejoin society again, those people should be allowed to send their kids 5 days a week or 4 days a week for this year. If you don't want to send your kids, don't send your kids, or have them go 2 days a week. And, you know, attendance is waived this year. It is so important for not only the kids, but for parents. If we want our economy actually stimulated, parents need to go to work. And we can't keep relying on the government to send us our own money to kind of like pay us off. I'm getting a little upset because I've seen my children be affected by this. And I think the time has come to say, if you're ready to go to school, it's the parents' choice. Let's send them to school. The governor closed us down. Why is it per each school board or superintendent? Massachusetts is open. They have way more people than we do. Florida is open. They have way more people than we do. And their numbers aren't going up. It's very clear that schools are not where this is transmitting. I am pleading, I am begging, praying and hoping and wishing. If you want to send your kid to school, we should be able to send our kids to school. And with that, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Way to go, Nicolette.
Love ya.
Ms. Brooks, we have X.
I think I'm X. Yeah. I'd like to echo actually a lot of what she just said. It kind of takes a lot off my load for having to come up with all those great words, but it's to the point where if we don't try this out in May and find out what's wrong with the system that we're trying to bring our kids back to for 5 days a week, then we're going to start off in the fall and have to go through this entire program and try to figure out what's not working and potentially miss an entire another school year. And our kids just can't keep doing it. I mean, I have 4 in the district ranging from high school to elementary to middle school. And it's just not great on any of them. They need this time, they need this school. And I mean, we're all for it. We're hoping that we open up the 5 days. And I echo with her that if there's some sort of a program that we can instill that says, if you're not comfortable with your child being there 5 days, I totally, am fine with that. We're not going to hold them accountable, but let's let the kids who are and the parents who are with that, let's send them right back.
Woo woo!
Thank you for your comment.
You're here.
All right.
Yeah. I'd appreciate it out of respect for all the speakers who have perhaps opposing views that you might entertain, if we could just keep those kind of comments to a minimum, please. And just let the speaker speak. Thank you.
Ms. Brooks, Dave Collins.
Good evening, everyone. I have one question. Have the teachers been polled exactly how it would affect them or their students? I know we had, I think Mr. Wirtz mentioned even just specifically about the chemistry classrooms, but have they been polled even anonymously about how it affect them or their students? That's just a general question, and as far as my personal opinion, the logistics of changing to either the second or third option seem crazy, honestly, for such a short time. Between the busing, I mean, someone mentioned, Mr. Howell mentioned that it could be 2 people to a bus, to a seat, with the windows open, it's allowed. But what happens if there's 2 people to a seat and it starts pouring? Spring storms are not unheard of. It doesn't make sense. I absolutely agree that the kids need to be in school. It has greatly affected my kids. It has, but it's crazy to think of what it would take for just a few extra days this school year to put it into action. The summer break would make much more sense to think about it and plan the logistics of it. As mentioned previously, I think one of the fathers mentioned he's actually administering the vaccines. So he's on the front lines and is seeing what's happening. He said that the vaccines will be upward of possibly 70% by the fall. That would make a huge difference. And we would probably be able to get into 5 days a week. But to do that in such a short period of time for just a couple of weeks doesn't make sense to me. I think we really need to take the summer and really think about the actual plan and logistics of it. And has there also, another question is, have there been any thoughts about the actual quarantine plan if something does happen, if we do go back to 4 or 5 days a week? What is going to be done? I mean, because especially at the high school, it's going to affect a lot more kids. What is the overall plan?
I know that's been considered. Mr. Howell, you might want to speak to that.
I think, Dave, just to answer your question, we would follow the exact same procedure that we followed all year long, which is our nurses and administrators looking to identify who are possible close contacts and following, and then consulting with the CDC to see who needs to quarantine. And as I shared in the presentation, there would be, in both options of 2 and 3, when you put more people into a classroom, you do create greater opportunity for larger quarantines.
Thank you.
Ms. Brooks, we have Sporier, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name.
Oh, no problem. This is Susan. I just have a couple of quick thoughts. First off, I just want to say I appreciate all of the time and effort the administration and teachers have put behind the last year. I also understand that we all have personal stories to share to support one direction or another. That said, we need to base this decision on objective truths. Taking emotion out of the decision is incredibly challenging, but if we can open schools in compliance with the guidelines, it really isn't a decision any longer. Conversely, I'm going to completely contradict my previous statement. As I say, to take emotion out of the decision, there are many parents on this call this evening, but I do wonder how many parents are on this call that represent those children whose best part of their day is at school. This is where they receive their validation, their meals, their smiles, where they feel safest. These children are likely grossly underrepresented on this call. And if we're putting emotion in this decision, they should really be at the heart of it.
Thank you.
Shannon Trainer.
Hi, thank you for putting this together, and I have a comment and a question. So my first comment, I have a middle schooler who's in 7th grade and an elementary student who's in 2nd grade. I do think all along that Windham has done a really great job this year. I've seen other school districts, shutting down for 2 weeks because of one case. So I really do applaud Superintendent Howell and the principals and the work that they did. I will say my kids when I told them that we're discussing going back, 4 days or 5 days, they were very excited and they're like, are we going on Monday? So my kids are anxious to go back. They miss their friends. They miss their teachers. They love learning. My biggest concern is for my younger one in primary school who, they're young, so they're learning how to learn. I'm not a teacher. I have to spend days home with her, helping her with her schoolwork, which is not a lot of schoolwork. They're in school, 7 hours a day, and we mainly do about 2 hours. The same with my middle school child. So there's a lot of downtime. And then, trying to not have screen time. I think I work in the behavioral health field, and I think it's not a surprise that this year during the pandemic that pediatric mental health visits to the ER has skyrocketed. Teenage suicide has skyrocketed. So when we talk about, you know, I appreciate the parents who are concerned about their kids who are anxious with schedule changes, because that is very real. And I think having that option to go full remote if we went back to school 4 or 5 days, I think is a good option for parents who don't want to, you know, participate in this. But I think we also need to look at the ripple effects and the systemic issues of the mental health of our kids with this disruption, the financial impacts this is having on families who, for younger kids, have to have, you know, additional daycare, after school care, you know, the lack of productivity of parents who've been called back to work really this past summer, who are trying to balance a full-time job and homeschool their children. So, you know, and I completely echo the woman who just spoke previously, you know, that, you know, child abuse rates are going up because, you know, the kids that are coming into school, you know, teachers are not having eyes on them as much. You know, childhood hunger, main hunger for children is a big issue. So there's a lot of issues. So I would love to have 5 days, but I understand the transportation issues and thinks it does make sense for the full 4 days because of that transportation issue. So those are my comments. So I fully support that. My one question is, in the previous meeting last week, Superintendent Howell had spoke about one of the reasons May 10th was the issue. The start date was the vaccination of teachers. And my question is, I know you're not requiring it for teachers, but how are you tracking, if at all, tracking what teachers are getting vaccinated for us to know by May 10th, how many percentage of teachers are actually going to be vaccinated if there's really no tracking mechanism to that. So that is all. Thank you.
Mr. Howell.
And I'll answer. I've obviously had a good number of conversations with staff across the district, and in having conversations about vaccination when things are happening, that's where my data has come from. So it's more anecdotal from individuals and being able to do that. Honestly, one of the things that I am most looking forward to in vaccinations, because my phone is the one that rings when we have a case to look at what's going to happen next. And we're just now, from the early Johnson & Johnson individuals, starting to reach a point where staff don't have to quarantine. And we've just had a couple so far, but that is promising, because as we have gone through this entire pandemic, biggest concern has been committing to those hybrid days so that we can stay open. And we all know that quarantines can have an impact on large numbers of staff members as we work through this. So I know there's some individuals who've not had their first shot, and there's some individuals that will be getting their second shots right after April break. So.
Thank you.
Ms. Brooks, Kim Saucier has her hand up.
Hi, I'm a parent of a freshman in high school, and I have 2 7th graders. And I guess I just like to echo, you know, some of what other people have said, that I do feel like this has made a really big impact on my children's personalities in a negative way. I have a daughter who went into high school, and it just was not that great of an experience of starting high school. I think it was really confusing for her. And she's a high honors student. She's in all honors classes. And it was just a really, really stressful time. She's a kid who has never had any issues with school whatsoever. And this year, her anxiety levels have gone up. She's become very introverted. And so I just think that being able to be in school more would alleviate some of those issues. My 2 7th graders, they both have ADHD, and you know, I think it's just really hard to stay focused. I find that they're behind a lot more. And I do want to say that I think all of the teachers have done a fantastic job. I don't interact as much with the teachers at the high school, but as far as the middle school, I just cannot even say enough good things about Wyndham Middle School. I think the staff is fantastic, the administration and all their teachers, but there's just only so much they can do when they're only in class 2 days a week. Between December and February, both of my boys had been quarantined each, I think 2 or 3 times. So, I mean, when you add that up, there was like maybe 5 days in almost 2 months that they were actually in school. And that just takes a negative impact on their education. They fall behind. You know, we do have a tutor that comes once a week, but it's really hard for them to stay caught up. It's really hard between all of the electronic systems and being in school and paper and going back and forth, to just really stay on track with what they're doing. And at this point, I mean, I can understand not wanting to change things this late in the game, but I do think that even 1 week of full in-person, in-class learning is worth more than a whole month of remote learning. And that's just my comments, and that I hope to see them all go back to school for at least a short time, even if it was this year.
Appreciate it, Kim. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Brooks, Carol Leonard.
I am compelled to point out that if we bring everybody back, we will have more people quarantined more often, more kids quarantined more often. If your kids have already been quarantined 5 days so far in the past 2 months, expect them to be quarantined more like 10 in the last month, because by definition, the more numbers there, the higher the transmission rate. Plus, as somebody referenced earlier, the rates are already going up in Maine and nationally. The head of the CDC was saying that she is extremely concerned. I feel like
Thank you, Carol.
I'm underestimating that. Thank you.
Shaylin.
Hi, yes. I just wanted to say, actually, my daughter raised my hand.
Excellent. I love that.
Yes. I have 2 daughters in Wyndham Primary School, and both of them would be ecstatic to end the year with everyone. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further questions?
It looks like Natasha Scott has another question.
I'd just like to kind of ask, a lot of us as adults are now going back to the stores. We're all going out shopping. We're all probably starting to expand, going into restaurants as it's getting nicer. If you are comfortable going to the grocery store, if you are comfortable going out into public and doing these things, I don't see why we are not allowed to start bringing the kids back into the school. I think if we can go to the grocery store and take things off of the shelves that everybody else is touching, I think we should be able to let our kids go back and get the education that we all got when we were younger. While I do see that there are definitely some aspects where we definitely have to be careful. We don't want this being cross-contaminated. We don't want anybody getting sick. We also have to take the leap of faith and say, hey, it's time to take a step in and make this move.
Thank you, Natasha.
Ms. Brooks, Kim Saucier.
I just had one other quick comment about the quarantining, because one thing that we found that was a little, I guess, confusing about the quarantine was, so I have twins in 7th grade and I have a daughter in high school, and the twins are on the same teaching team, but not in the same classroom. And so there was times when one of them would be quarantined and the other wasn't, but yet they're on the same teaching team. They're still being exposed to roughly the same teachers. They have all the same teachers. The other 2 kids could go to school according to CDC guidelines, but the one that was quarantined couldn't. So I just think that, maybe they're, obviously the school board's not the CDC, but, is there some level of interpretation with quarantining rules? Because, 3 kids in the same household, if only one's quarantined and the other 2 can still go to school, then that just, it doesn't kind of all add up really well. That's all I just wanted to add.
Thank you.
We have Brandon Bernard.
Hi, good evening. I was wondering if, I'm just joining in a little bit late, sorry.
That's all right.
If it was discussed to allow primary to stay the course, partially remote, partially in person, and to allow the older kids to return to school.
Currently those are not options on the table, but it's up for discussion.
Ms. Brooks, Kelly Crockett.
Kelly?
Hi, I just want to, most of you know, teach 5th grade at Jordan Small Middle School. I'm not a resident of either community, so I don't know if I need special permission to be speaking or not.
You may have it.
Thank you. First of all, I want to echo what other teachers have said. I want nothing more than to have my students with me, all of them, all the time. But I'm not sure this is the right time for it. And I want to make sure that parents who aren't in the classroom and wouldn't have this necessarily this understanding, but if we go back full time, 4 days or 5 days, and pull those kids back in together, it's not we jump in that first day and we move full speed ahead. There's reacclimation going in. I've had conversations in the past couple of days with students, some who were thrilled at the thought of it and others who are scared, quite frankly. So I'm hearing all the parents sharing what their kids are saying, and kids are saying that to teachers too. So there's a process of kind of pulling us all together again, as far as instead of just having cohort A and cohort B becoming one. And there are a lot of other logistical things that have to happen as far as just going to lockers or moving in the hallway to get from point A to point B. That has to be considered as well.
Thank you very much.
Suna Shah.
Welcome.
Hi there, thanks. I was wrestling with whether I wanted to chime in or not, but I feel like it needs to be said. I'm a parent of 4 kids at 3 different schools in Wyndham. We love RSU 14, and we think you guys have done an amazing job keeping our kids safe through this. But especially as a parent of my older kids, they need more in-person time. Their schooling, they're done by 10 a.m. on their remote days. They're videoing and playing video games and hanging out with their friends. And it's one long weekend after another for them. I've seen one of my kids who was very social, just kind of not want to leave the house anymore. It's really impacting their mental health, and they're generally very active and very, outgoing kids. And so I really strongly feel like we need to start looking at how to increase this time, because reacclimating is going to happen whether we wait for the fall or we do it right now. We've got to get these kids more time. Thanks.
Thank you. I don't see any more hands. Do you, Christine?
I do not.
If you're hesitant, don't be hesitant. We do want to hear from you. But if we've gone the course here, just know again, oops, there we go. Love it.
David Moore.
Hi, thank you. Just getting on here late. I just following up on some things that I've heard recently. Again, I'm getting here a little bit later, but the one thing is, and I think this is a fact, that COVID is going to be within our community for the foreseeable future in some capacity. It's a virus that's going to be here, like it or not, for the next couple of years that we know of. It's going to take a fair amount of time for it to completely rid itself. But going forward, I think the most important thing for all us to remember is probably our kids of this community are going to be the future of this community. That to me is probably the utmost importance to all of us. And I think it's probably the single parent households, the disenfranchised, that are probably suffering the most from the situation where those kids being in school for that 6-8 hours a day is probably the most important 6 or 8 hours a day for that child. That's what bothers probably us the most. If you work within the community, you get to see some of these kids showing up to some of these job sites where they really don't belong on. Construction, but it's part of the gig. We're all making do. And at the end of the day, really, it's like, how long is it going to go on for? COVID's going to be here in the fall. It's probably going to be here next spring. It's just, where do we go from here?
Thank you, David.
Kim Saucier.
I just had a quick question. If that it's decided that we don't go back in person for the remainder of the year, is there anything that can be done on remote days to make it more engaging for the kids, so that, because I same as a couple other parents, you know, my kids are done by like 10 a.m. and they don't wake up till, you know, I drag them out of bed. And so they're not doing a whole lot on their remote days. Is it possible for them to maybe Zoom into classes? Can the teachers be set up so that on their at-home days, you know, they're able to kind of Zoom in and maybe like cohort B is zooming in on cohort A days and vice versa, just to get a little bit more interaction and classroom time on their remote days, because I just think they're really unproductive. Through no fault of the teachers, it's just, I think it's just the nature of the way that it is right now.
I don't have an answer for that, Mr. Howell.
Yeah, I mean, definitely it's something that we can take a look at. And I will speak as a parent who have a parent of a high school junior who is currently in quarantine himself. I am experiencing this and have experienced this firsthand. You know, those remote days are important days, and yes, we can take a look at what happens on those days. Absolutely.
Great, thank you.
Cynthia.
Sorry, I'm not very good with the computer. I thought I was raising my hand, yet I was like clapping or something. So I apologize for that.
You're fine.
So I first of all, I just want to start off by thanking everybody for the grace, you know, that you've done and given throughout this whole thing. I appreciate all of the communication that has been given through RSU 14. You know, that's been just wonderful. So bravo. This is nothing that anybody really wants or is enjoying. And I have a little girl in kindergarten, and I feel like there does need to be more time. I understand the logistics of, you know, the virus and why we're trying to keep classes to a minimum. I just don't, and I came in late too, so I just don't know, like within each school, is it just there isn't an ability to have like the space for just those same classroom sizes, but just have everyone in person and utilizing every space there is? And have we thought about maybe keeping the classroom together, but having the teachers move for the older grades, so that you're not having that all kinds of kids moving around through the school and you're just having teachers, that kind of thing. I don't know what's been talked about. So I apologize if I'm reiterating or copying what everyone else has said. So
no problem. I think having teachers move at the high school, schedules are so different. I think that would be really difficult to accomplish. I know that the administrative team has sliced and diced so many options, 10 ways to Sunday, to see how we might make it work. That's not to say they haven't considered everything, but they really, behind the scenes, I have to tell you how hard the administration has worked to try to come up with some solutions. So Cynthia, I appreciate your comments. I have to say, in listening to everybody, because I don't see any more hands, are there anybody? Don't let me jump in before y'all have a chance.
I don't see any, Ms. Brooks.
If you have one while I'm rambling here, just toss it up and we'll get to you. First of all, I really want to thank all of you who have taken the time to Becky, do you have something that you would like to share? I think you've been on before. Do you have anything else you'd like to share?
I just want to say, what better way to reward these kids that for all their hard work, social distancing away from kids that they see outside of school, mask wearing and everything else like that, for the last month to get them back into school with their friends and finish on a high note. That's what we should be doing.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank all of you who have joined us this evening. I don't know, I'm looking here. We were up to 220, maybe more than that at one point, of folks who have taken the time to join us. And it truly means a lot to us to get your perspective. It's safe to say that we don't get public participation very often. So it's really wonderful to hear your points of view. I think it's safe to say that there's probably not going to be a one-size-fits-all for our district, and that's what makes this so challenging. I do want to thank again the administration. They have worked incredibly hard, from central office to the school principals and assistant principals, all of whom I know are on this Zoom. So I want to acknowledge them. It's been challenging for everybody. I particularly want to thank the teachers and the ed techs and the bus drivers and the nutrition people who, let's face it, let's give a handout to school nutrition, because they have done just an incredible job making sure that our kiddos are fed throughout all of this pandemic. It's just been an amazing feat, and we're so proud of them. Back to the teachers and the staff. We know how hard this has been. We know it's challenging for parents. It's challenging for all of us. Shortly, the board is going to be deliberating a little bit. We're not going to be making a decision this evening. We're going to share our points of view and also ask Chris any clarifying questions that we might have. We're going to take the week after this to listen to feedback and check any other questions that you might have on the website. We take this very seriously. We take emails very seriously. They all have a tremendous impact on our decision making. And so I really, truly appreciate hearing from parents and guardians. It really makes a difference. I think there's a Jennifer who would like to speak.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I don't really care to speak, but I feel like I have to. I'm a former teacher. I worked in RSU 14 quite a while ago when I was pregnant with my son. I have 3 kids in the district. One actually graduated in March. It was not a send-off. When you talk about emotional, for these kids to be home and to go through this pandemic, I understand what the parents are saying. When you have a senior in high school who cannot attend their last moments of high school with their friends and their teachers. So I understand what parents are saying about mental health. I do wish we would have had this discussion a while ago. I think that right now some kids are going to struggle going back full-time right now. And I think that they would struggle going back 4 days a week. And my main concern right now is my daughter's been quarantined twice. She's a junior in high school. If you bring these children back, kids, students, May 10th, that could go into their finals. It could also go into the seniors' graduation activities if they are allowed to have any. I think it's wonderful that they've booked the arena this year. We had very limited for our children. The colleges around us, St. Joe's, my son attends, he's half in person and half home. And where he just graduated, I would say he's struggling mentally as well with his mental health, being not around his friends anymore, being half-time at home, half-time at the college. SMCC, local college, they're home full-time. I just have a question. How are we going to plan when Mr. Howell says that we're going to kind of do what we're doing with these quarantines right now? That's, I think Mr. Collins asked the question, what is the plan for the quarantine? But for finals, I think that's a valid point for the older kids. I have a child at Manchester. I'm okay if he goes back, but for my older child, I think that it's going to create a lot of issues at the high school. I don't know how to say that more eloquently, but I'm nervous that she's going to be quarantined the last 2 weeks of school and she'll miss her finals. Or, you know, my daughter's also, both of my children are arts kids. They haven't been to one activity in a year. She just started her chamber singers back a couple of weeks ago after being quarantined. If she gets quarantined again, then that goes out the window. I think that these are valid concerns of some of us parents going forward.
Thank you, Jennifer. If we don't have any further questions or comments, and I see none, again, I want to thank you all for participating. We're going to swing over to board discussion. Very good, Pete.
All right, thank you. Chris, I just have a couple of clarifying questions to start off the discussion here. I don't truly understand the differences between the 4-day proposal and the 5-day proposal. I was a little bit lost on what's different about Fridays that would cause problems with transportation and other aspects. Can you just clarify that first of all, please?
Sure. It actually comes to dismissal time because Fridays would need to be a half day for our elementary students. And given that we'd be running a different dismissal time for what we've been discussing would be for the elementary schools, for the high school, and then for the middle schools, the amount of time that kids would actually be in school would create some issues because we basically would be bringing them and feeding them and then putting them back on the bus in order to get those buses back to then do a high school run and then to do either middle school or a second high school run. So that was one element. The other issue, Pete, along with it is right now our part-time staff, we've concentrated on the 4 days to make sure that we have room coverage and we have them working extra hours. We would lose many of those individuals on the Friday.
Okay, all right, thank you. My next question is, how did you work through, like if we were to go back to a 4 or 5 day in person, how did we work through the spacing at lunchtime when the kids are unmasked and the 6 foot requirement? What are the plans there, the specifics of that?
Sure. So at the high school level, high school model would be, we'd have to do a 12:40 dismissal, and students that would be staying for lunch, or actually students for lunch, that would be a grab and go program where pre-made lunches would be ready and then kids would grab them on the way out. For the other buildings, and we can have other principals going in, looking at combination of lunches in the cafeteria, other open spaces, and classrooms. So we'd need to do lunches in multiple places.
All right, are those plans all worked out, or is that something that still has to be figured out?
Danielle has her hand raised, so I'm gonna let her jump in.
We're still figuring out some of the details, especially around rain days, because our plan, and every school's capacity is different in how they use their space and the number of kids, number of staff, as Chris has said earlier, but our plan is to have students eat outside before they play. So we wouldn't use the CAF or the gym unless rainy days, we would need a plan B. But I think every school has a little different plan for that.
All right, yeah, the nice days would, and hopefully there's many of them to come, would be easier. But yeah, those inclement weather days would be a challenge. And then lastly, before I give up my time here, you know, I understand that, I mean, based on what we heard tonight, I mean, this isn't easy. there's a clear divide. I mean, there's, I think it was pretty evenly split in terms of people that want to bring back the kids and people that want to keep things the way they are. And this is mostly what we heard was from parents. And we still haven't heard a lot from the teachers or the students themselves. I have heard some things anecdotally, and I know that there's a population of teachers out there that aren't comfortable going back 5 days or 4 days. I know there's a population of students that aren't. So for those that are currently in a hybrid system, whether it be teachers or students, if the district chose to move in the direction of full-time in person, are there things that are going to be offered? Will those students be given the opportunity to go fully remote and try to match it up with teachers that could then become fully remote teachers for those ones that didn't feel comfortable going back 5 days a week? I mean, I know a lot of the teachers that are hybrid are there 4 days a week, but even that 5th day, those are just some of the things I've been thinking about.
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges that we have with this, Pete, is that first of all, being able to entertain the idea of having people in is because we have so many students that are in a remote option right now. Where we would run into some difficulties would be with kids that would want to go from hybrid back to remote. RSU 14 has had a unique model for the state of Maine for how we have done remote instruction, which is we're one of the few districts that have live in-person teachers that have regular classrooms that are meeting and doing remote instruction. Many districts have hired learning facilitators who then are working with kids on software, and kids need to make progression, and it's really self-paced. We may need to move to a software model for those ones that we cannot accommodate during that period of time. We know a number of classrooms that have already been established for the remote teams. There was quite a bit of movement on the remote teams back in January. Those have kind of settled in. So it would require providing some other options, not necessarily with a teacher.
You all set, Pete?
For now, yes.
Okay. I think Christina was next.
Thank you. I have a handful of questions. First, Chris, I think I heard you say that if we went to a 4 or a 5 day model that you might have to close a building for a day in order to do contact tracing. Does that mean that if a case was reported midday, you're going to early release that building?
We one of the scenarios that we were talking about, we would have to then start calling and get kids out of there as quickly as possible. It depends, Christina, obviously on the grade level, where elementary classrooms, typically if we're doing quarantines, it's the classroom. So we would need to go ahead and contain that group, call families and have them come pick up. High school's the one that's a bit of a challenge for us because we have kids that go across multiple teachers, classroom teachers. And so those middle of the day quarantines would prevent some logistical challenges on getting kids out of there. I think what we would run into for issues though would be, let's say right now at 7 o'clock, I received a call to say that we have X number of students that need to quarantine. For us to be able to contact all those families and then being able to open school the next day, especially in this model where today was an A day, tomorrow's a B day. If I received today about an A day, we would have tomorrow to be able to contact trace and be able to work through. If we were all in, it would be, we might have to be remote tomorrow while that process takes place for teachers and administrators and the nurses.
Okay, my next question, I was wondering if, again, if we're going to the 4 or the 5 day model, does that mean that all the IEPs also have to be rewritten again to accommodate the additional minutes of school? Can Lisa speak to what kind of workload that would be? If she's still here.
I saw her here.
Yeah, so we're here. So as of right now, Christina, we have been able through special education to cover all of our students' IEPs either in a in-person or remote or combination. So we have our full remote kids get all their services remote. Our hybrid kids, some of them get the services in person on the days they're here, and others who have more service get their also get remote service on the day they're home. So, you know, for example, if you had an A-day student, they would get in-person reading instruction on Monday, but they could also get remote instruction on Tuesdays and Thursdays, especially with related service providers as well. A number of our students have time from our related service providers, speech, social work, those that also get done on remote days. Honestly, we're trying to be as flexible as we can to meet the needs of the district, but we hope to minimize the impact on special education. In terms of rewriting the IEPs, I don't believe that we would have to rewrite them based on a change. We are currently providing FAPE or free public education to all of our students based on if we were in full in person. So we're doing our very best to get students what they need by doing it a combination of ways. When I heard Pete say his thing, that like causes me to pause, because if you create more options that we have to then try to shift kids, you're changing case. We have to be truthful. You end up changing teachers, changing case managers. And, you know, just a reminder, we're short 12 and a half staff that I presented to the board last week when I spoke. And so, you know, I'm going to try to make it work, but to answer your question, there would be some impact on special ed, the more changes you consider as far as scheduling goes.
Okay, thank you. Lastly, I would just like to hear from Kyle and Drew if they're still here, just because I know in primary school, we have some pretty high ratios in the classroom, and I'd love to hear how you're gonna fit additional kids while also still maintaining the 3 feet that are required. And at the middle level where we have some smaller classrooms in there, like if they could speak to the logistics of how they're going to do that, that would be great.
I think I beat Kyle to everything. So in terms of the challenges with the reopening plan, the room sizes, given that that's one of the reasons why we're number 5 on the list for the state in terms of school, most of our rooms are 80% the DOE size. So when we look at actual class sizes, so when we figured everything out in the fall, that was based on room capacities, like Dan Wirtz talked about, square footage, those types of things, 6 feet of distance. And so many kids have probably gone home and talked to their parents about the teachers put me in a room with 21, 22 kids. And part of that is we need some real live data about if we can fit the kids in. And so I have a spreadsheet in front of me. I'm not going to share that. It's not quite complete. I have about 3/4 of the staff that have gone through this process. So the expectation this week was to look at their maximum capacity in terms of the class. So of their 4 blocks on an A and a B day, if they were to combine them and add 1 kid, just as a little bit of a buffer, can they actually fit them at 3 feet? And so most of those are coming back that they can, but I want to be clear about what that means is that it's tight, in that if kids shift around, move around, right, 3 feet's not a lot of distance. And so if you move into one side or the other, you've broken that 3 foot rule. The reality is, even now with half the kids in school, we know that kids violate that on a consistent basis, not because they want to, because it's the nature of classrooms, it's the nature of movement, it's the nature of lines that even adults have a hard time following. You know, the reality is it's mass, in my opinion, that make the biggest difference between transmission within school. And I think there's a lot of data to support that in terms of the number of cases, kids that have had COVID in school or staff members, and the very few number of transmissions that we see at this level for all the cases that I'm aware of. So we can make lunches work with the number of lunches that we have. We can fit almost 80 students at 6 feet without masks on in the cafeteria, another 20 in the gym lobby. We can do some breakfast snacks in the hallways, those types of things. We do have some at the middle school level, some different plans if room sizes aren't what we're comfortable with. There are some other options for my school specifically. It would mean to be able to have those classrooms occupied, but to bring the overall numbers down, there's sort of a creative solution to that, but it does require a daily early release in order to make that work. So we do have at least 2 options if we feel like classroom capacities are not in the comfort level that we want to be at. Does that make sense, Christina?
Okay.
Christina, for Wyndham Primary School, right now, if both of our Group A and Group B cohorts come back, we'll have 15 classrooms of the 38 that have 18 or more learners in them, with the high being a classroom of 21. We're going to work with our facilities folks and central office to come up with some examples of how to set up a classroom and be able to have all of those 21 or less learners in it and follow the guidelines of 3 feet. So we have to give teachers some options on how they can set up their classroom. And then of course, every space and every teacher has the ability to be able to make that work for how they want to best instruct and how to best use the furniture that we can provide. Where the challenge comes is with lunch, and that's been been discussed a little bit and shared earlier in this meeting. Our plan at this point in time for lunch is that when 6 feet is not possible and having all the learners in the one space, we'll create a schedule to access other spaces in the building. As anyone who has walked the primary school when we're all in session, we use our space wisely and do our best to optimize the space that we do have, knowing that we have some challenges by the number of learners we have in the building. So we do have the ability right now to have a few spaces that are not always used around that lunch block of time. For example, our cafeteria, our stage, some of the other spaces throughout the building that aren't being used at those times would be accessed for some overflow in classrooms where, so for example, let's take the example of the 21 learners in a classroom. We'll have to have some of those learners eat lunch in another space on a consistent basis. So let's say, for example, 5 of those learners each day would go to another learning space that isn't being used at that time, and then they would be able to space out.
Christina, are you all set? Great. We're fortunate to have on the school board a student representative, and her name is Molly Cochran. And so we would love to hear the student perspective. Molly, you're on.
Hi, for anybody on the call who doesn't know, I'm a senior at the high school. I wanted to come on tonight and say that I support option 1, which would be the every other Friday option. I think right now a lot of students are comfortable where they're at with the every other day, especially at the high school. A lot of kids have jobs, activities, other things going on in their lives. And to change that just for a month of school might affect a lot of kids. Also with the quarantines, it sounds like we may end up losing days of school due to higher risk of quarantine or the contact tracing days. But I think if we went every other Friday, we'd have a lot more engagement rather than being on Zoom on Fridays. In my classes, I know not a lot of kids engage with the teacher, but when I'm in class, I definitely get a lot more out of the class, which is why I would support that option 1. I also had a question for Mr. Howell, which would be if we were to do the option 2, which would be the 5 days a week, you said that the dismissal would be at 12:40. Would that be every day or would that just be on Fridays?
No, it would need to be every day.
Okay.
In order to accommodate, we need and Mr. Karen's on here as well. So if I botch it, he can come in and save me. But part of it is needing to have that cafeteria space to use as possible overflow classroom space. And so it'd be set up as classroom versus being set up for lunches.
Okay.
We would build classrooms in the cafeteria, in the 2 cafeterias in the back of the auditorium with 25 seats. So that in instances where we've got, in honors classes or AP classes in particular, where we've got over 25 students that would be there, the teacher could move to those spots. And then the hour after lunch, we would have teachers tag students for Pride. We'd move Pride to the afternoon, and students that were asked by teachers to stay, either an AP teacher could keep a whole class, or teachers could tag several students for remediation. We could feed upwards of 150, 200 kids with the classroom set up, and then those students would work with their teachers for 50 minutes to an hour after the majority of the students have left.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Molly. Appreciate your comments. I believe Jenny's next.
Yes, thank you. We've heard parents and staff, the whole spectrum. I would really like to have more data from the general public for parents and staff to see how they think and what option they would like. So if we could get some more data, that would be great. Would that be easily enough done, Mr. Howell?
Yes, that's something we could actually put together a quick survey and get it out with a short timeline to get it back.
Thank you, that's all.
And if I know Christine well enough, she's already written it right as I was saying that.
Marge.
Kate was ahead of me.
Oh, you're right, she was. I'm sorry.
She's got that pale hand, that's why.
That's why I couldn't see it.
Very kind of you. I was gonna let you go though if you wanted.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. I do have a few questions. Some of them have been answered, which is good. But I wanted to follow up on Pete's question on the not quite understanding the Fridays. I get it that the concern is Friday being a half day. But I guess I was wondering, why would Friday be the half day versus how Wednesdays used to be the half day for the elementary level? What if that was the situation?
I think part of it is that right now, as far as transitioning and making an easier transition, all the specialist schedules are already written for those 4 days. And so to then throw everything up. The other thing that we're also very aware of is that on the remote days, many parents who need to have childcare options have secured those on Fridays. And so if there were a change, it's easier to do that on the Friday versus now creating a new day.
Okay, nope, good, thank you. My next question, oh, sorry, is that all right? Can I keep going?
No, I didn't know if you were done or not.
No, I think I have maybe two more.
No.
My next question is, there was not a mention for CTE students. And I guess I would just really love to hear how returning either 4 or 5 days would or possibly would not affect them. Maybe we haven't heard about them because they're not affected.
Brian, do you want to go ahead?
Sure thing. So Westbrook schools have no plan at changing, at this point, have no plan at changing their model. So they're going to continue in the hybrid, with Fridays being a remote day. So our CTE students that go to Westbrook would have 4 or 5 days with us, and 2 of those days they would attend the vocational center. In our schedule, afternoon students would lose some class time on the 2 days that they went to the vocational center, but they'd be making up more class time on the 2 days that they got to stay with us a little bit longer, because they wouldn't have to leave. So they would lose a little bit of class time, just the afternoon students. And they could make that time up after lunch if they needed to. The PADS is more open to, they don't have a set Friday day, because they've got schools that use Friday as their flex day, and other schools that use Wednesday. So they would be open to discussion about having kids go additional days, but we have limitation in busing to send additional students, and they would need to know, would want to know our plan before they opened up that option. But at the surface level, they'd continue their programming 2 days a week, and then have programming at the high school 4 or 5, whichever plan we went with.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question is just a point of clarification, because you had mentioned, Chris, in your presentation about the serial testing for teachers. And I thought that you had said that that eliminated the need for quarantining.
Anyone who's participating in a serial testing still needs to quarantine outside of school hours. Okay. As an essential worker, they can come in, do their job. They need to wear a higher grade mask, but it allows them to come to work and participate in work. But it still doesn't remove them out of quarantine. That option has not been available to students. It's only available to staff members through the governor's order and through Maine CDC.
Okay, but so essentially that would help, that being in place would help to eliminate the need to close a school for lack of teachers or bus drivers or something like that, correct? Correct.
And I mean, I'll give you a great example. I think right now across the district, we have probably close to a dozen to 15 individuals who are serial testing currently so that we can stay open.
And I think that's it. The other one was answered. It was special ed and Christina asked it. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Marge, your turn.
Okay, just for clarification, Chris, because we're in so many meetings and I can't remember what meetings they were in, but from different administrators, and I need to know if my recollection is correct, that they had voiced at times that they were having an issue on the with the hybrid students on their days that they were not in school, having them be at the other end of the screen that they were supposed to be at. Like I said, I don't remember, it could have been at the CT, it could have been at any one of the meetings, but is my recollection correct on that has been a problem with some of the kids on their, the days that they're home?
Marge, it's actually, that was discussed in one of our CTE meetings. And you're absolutely right. The days that we heard from the CTE Center, which was that on those off days when somebody might be hybrid and they're attending a program, that there are days that kids go missing. We do see that with some kids in our remote program where there are days where there's blank screens. And so I know our principals who are working with remote have been messaging about the importance of keeping screens on, keeping kids engaged. I think that's a worry that all of us have had, is that we could lose a student and just that they check out and they're gone.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that because there's so many meetings, sometimes I forget where I heard what. Thank you. That's it, Kate.
Thank you. Anna.
Okay, I apologize if you guys all know this. Chris, what is serial testing?
Sure. We participate. We have a license here in the district for the Binex Now testing program, which is a rapid test for COVID. And it's a test that takes about 15 minutes to administer. And part of what was approved, and this was announced February 12th by Dr. Shaw, and it was, if we have a staff member who has to quarantine because they're a close contact, as long as they're asymptomatic, because we don't want to encourage symptomatic people, they would come to school. And what we've been doing is the nurses have been meeting the individuals in the parking lot or been meeting them at an outside window. They've been doing a swab. The test has been administered. The person goes back to their vehicle. If it comes back negative, they're allowed to work that day fully masked, and it allows them to return to work. One of the big issues has been quarantining staff, because especially if you have staff that then have to go home.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Just a couple other really quick ones. And I know this is going to be a little sort of theoretical, like your best guess. So like we got the email today that there was a couple more cases. So, and I know one of them had a larger number of students quarantined. Do you have students and staff, do you have an idea, had we been even 4 days a week, so we have the full student body back or close to it, what would that have looked like, do you think, today?
I'm going to let Ryan answer that because he's the one that did all the notifications on that one.
would have been 55. Staff members would have been the same. It would have been 55 students.
Okay.
The cohort broke the right way for us in terms of numbers this time.
This time, yeah. And then just out of curiosity, it's similar to what Marge said. I have this memory in my brain somewhere of us saying we were going to like survey teachers or get feedback from teachers on sort of what they're, not necessarily a survey, but we were looking for a way to get information from them, like how are they feeling, what are their thoughts, get their input on it. And I'm just curious if I made that up, if we can do that.
No, it's something certainly that we can do. And I would think what we're talking about is that we did do a survey as part of our March 12 workshop day, in which we gained some feedback on where individuals were relative to the pandemic. We've not surveyed relative to reopening. And I think one of the suggestions that came from Jenny was going back and getting some of that feedback in preparation for the next board meeting.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Pete.
All right, so it sounds like most of us who had questions have had an opportunity to have our questions answered. So I guess I'll just open it up in terms of deliberation and just kind of sharing some thoughts. You know, over the course of this time, I've received some emails from members of the community, and I've seen a lot of comments on social media about our children suffering. And, you know, there seems to be a common theme out there. And then I really started thinking about, well, who exactly are the students that are suffering? And in my head, I started thinking, all right, well, it must be the students that are fully remote, that aren't getting any interactions with their peers. But I found it interesting tonight as we were listening, most of the people that were speaking up, that were talking about the students that are suffering, are students that are already in hybrid that just need more of those days, more of those interactions. I don't know that we heard from anybody that had kids that were fully remote in terms of who spoke up tonight. So that was an interesting thing that I kind of picked up on. And that seemed to be a theme. And the other theme that seemed to get pushed to the surface is that on the remote days, people don't seem to be satisfied with what's going on the remote days. And there's no easy answer to that. I have no solution for that. I mean, but I do witness it in my own household, is that, you know, in-person days are great. Remote days, not a lot seems to be happening. And so the way I see it right now is that if we can add any in-person days, we'd be moving in the right direction. But to move 4 to 5 days seems too drastic, based on what I've heard from people putting input in. So if we can move towards even one more day of in-person instruction, and we can try to make the remote days more productive or more meaningful, I think that's the direction that we should be trying to head. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you, Pete. Marge?
My hand down. I think the reason we haven't heard from the fully remote people, because this is what we're talking about now, has nothing to do with them, because this is not open to them, right, Mr. Howell?
At this point, it would be based on capacity.
Right, and from what I'm hearing, the capacity sounds like we'd be lucky to take all of the cohorts in. So, and the thing, all right, here's my thoughts on this. We have done what we have done out of necessity. Everything we do, we think we can't do. It's kind of, I remember last year, Pete saying, why do we have snow days? Why can't we do something else? Oh, well, you just can't. Well, all of it, or, I'm sorry, a year and a half ago. And then all of a sudden COVID hit, and then all of a sudden, guess what? Everybody can learn from home, you know? So that took care of snow days. So I think everybody is nervous about what it's gonna look like. This is not, I don't think everybody is in a comfortable mode doing 100% virtual or the cohort, but I think everybody's afraid to make the move because it's going to be the wrong move. Everything that I have heard and I have read, and it isn't just us, it's across the whole country, that kids are not doing well when they're not in school. Academically, I don't think we're going to know where they are until we get them all back in, and we probably wouldn't know in 1 month's time either. I feel bad. I feel bad for kids who are making a transition, kids that are going from elementary, all of a sudden going into middle school, going from middle school into the high school, and they've spent their last year and a half, almost 2 years, either not in school or in school 2 days a week. I think anything we can do to get kids back in school is going to help. Nobody likes change. I don't think any of it, out of necessity, we all went out, and I think people were happy to be in. I know a lot of families that are fully remote now are fully remote because they did not like the in and out, you know, that their kids all of a sudden had to stay home because there was a case, etc. So my thinking is I think we need to do whatever we can to get them back. And I agree. I think 5 days would probably be a bit much, because I think, and I understand what Chris is saying when he talks about we've stretched everybody to the limit, and there wouldn't be really anybody to serve the kids on a Friday. So that's my 2 cents for the moment.
Thanks. I don't see Scott, but you've been awful quiet. Do you have any thoughts? Yeah, there you are.
Yeah. Yes, I have been very quiet, uncharacteristically of me. I've just kind of been a fly on the wall, if you will, just kind of observing, paying attention. Everybody knows or has heard me speak over the last year. I think the majority of you know where I'm gonna probably land on this side. I think that I do have a couple of questions as far as, you know, the 4 day versus the 5 day. I'm still a little foggy on that. But I will say that I really want to get these kids back into school as much as we possibly can. I am really looking at, I want to get these kids back into school 5 days a week. I think that kids do much better when they're in school. I think that of the few students, and I would love to see some analytical data come out. I'd love to see not only polling parents, but polling students, polling of teachers. On that poll, you indicate which classification you would fall in. The students that I have talked to, they are of older age, and they don't really want to go back. They don't want to leave this current status that they're in, because they're able to work. And I understand where they're coming from, but I also understand that right now, their job is to be students. And I understand where there's a lot of concern as far as, you know, transmission in the community, but the data seems to support the facts that there is not very much transmission in schools when there is as much CDC guidance that's being followed with the schools. I also, I want to see a return on my investment with vaccinations. This one's going to be a little personal for me, but I'm going to go ahead and share it. I have friends, I have family that there is no longer a high risk category for vaccinations. That category doesn't seem to exist in this state anymore. My parents were bumped from getting their vaccination. I still have not seen my parents in over a year. But seems like the majority of the teachers were able to get their vaccinations. Teachers that are 35 years old, 30 years old, even some are 55, 60 years old. I guess I got a little bit of resentment because they were bumped to the front of the line. And now I want to see that because they were bumped to the front of the line, they are able to get their vaccinations. Now it's time to get our kids back in school. We need to put our kids first at this point. I was just looking today, and there has been 1,200 deaths of CDC reported COVID-19 in the United States. That's 1,200 people. And we got our schools shut down. It seems a little ridiculous that we are not back in school. So before I get too emotional, I'm going to exit out on that note. And I am very anxious to see the polling for where our students and our residents and our staffing lies. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Anna.
I think one of the biggest challenges we have as a board is it's not our job to pick what's best for me or what's best for my kid, or to say, I want this, or I need this, or my kid needs this. We have to act as we have to make a decision for we. It's not I, it's we. And it's not, we have to look at this at the greater good, and we have to look at it, what's best for our community. And that's what's best overall, not in one aspect. We have to think about the facts, the spread, because while it may have only been 1,200, if mine was one of that 1,200, my comments here would be drastically different than what they are, because thank God I don't have one of the 1,200. So it's a really difficult position. And I'm so extremely grateful that we're given the luxury of time to have these conversations tonight, and then say, we're going to step back and we're going to think about it, and we're going to research more, and we're going to think more, and we are going to look as a board at what is best for our community, not just about what's best for one individual or one group of individuals. We've got a heavy lift ahead of us, and I'm very, very grateful that we have the strong guidance that we have, and that we have the gift of time to really think about it and make the best decision that we can make for all of us.
Kate?
And I won't take it personally this time.
You know what? I know it. I just can't see your hand. I'm sorry.
I guess I just want to, first of all, I really want to take this time to give my gratitude to the folks that spoke up, because I was very much leaning one way, and hearing from them kind of had me second guessing my thoughts. However, there was one comment that was mentioned, and I really appreciate it because it kept me grounded, that if we can open with the guidelines that have been put in place by our CDC, then honestly, why are the 9 of us deciding whether or not we should? I actually am frustrated with the state that that's the case, is that it's a local decision, because if the state is saying that it's okay for schools to open, if Dr. Shaw is saying it's okay for schools to open, then then you know what really stinks is we are going to lose sleep for the next week over this decision. And I know how much our administrators have lost sleep for months over this decision. And it really is unfortunate that's happening. I get it. I appreciate everything our teachers have done. I know it will be difficult. I know it will. But I guess yeah, it's hard. I'm seeing some reactions, and I'm sorry if it's not what I'm saying is not really where you're feeling. But again, I think it's unfortunate that we are the ones that have to make this decision. I wish we had a little bit more guidance from the state on that.
Anybody else want to share their position or what their thoughts are?
I'd like to know yours, Ms. Briggs.
You would. This evening has been very informative for me. I mean, as you mentioned, Pete, it's pretty split from what we've heard from folks and from the emails that we've all received. Everyone is passionate about their position, passionate. And I get that. I think the most important thing that a parent can do is advocate for their child, and I appreciate the advocacy. Whether I'm for what you said or not, the fact that you're advocating is very important to me, and so I'm grateful for that. I initially, when I came into this, it seemed like more in person would be very helpful on a couple of fronts. I've heard, as you all have heard, about the social emotional concerns from students and parents, and it's a concern of mine as well. Regardless of which direction we go, as a district, we have to give great consideration to that at the start of the new school year when we come back and get back in the saddle fully, hopefully. When I think about the comments about the amount of time between now and the end of the year when we start this gig up, if we do, on May 10th, I have raised that question previously, knowing that for seniors in particular, they will not be in school that last week, or I don't know what the time frame is. Ryan could probably clarify that. As typical years, seniors, Ryan, would you explain that?
So my plan is to have the seniors finish up their instructional days just before Memorial Day and create a 10-day school activity free safety net so that no students are risking having to quarantine out of participation at graduation. So that week will be available for capstone completion and remediation as needed, but if students finish up everything ahead of time or on time and complete their capstone, then they should have the opportunity. We would have marching practice on June 1st and 2nd, and then we would have 10 days before the 13th. So we wouldn't cause, so they'd have a safety net around school events impacting graduation. So that would give seniors 3 weeks with us if we looked at May 10th as the start date. Now, athletes and students that need to remediate or finish up their capstone, they don't have that safety net, but those are choices.
Thank you. I'm really conflicted if you really want to know the honest truth. I appreciate hearing from more voices, and I guess this is the question that I would pose to Mr. Howell, because when I look at our calendar, we had originally decided to vote on April 7th, and it seems like there is great interest from the board to get some more information from students and staff and perhaps parents as well so that we'll be fully informed when we make this really difficult decision. So what does that look like if we get that information and then we deliberate on the 7th? I mean, typically as a board, and I'll throw it out to the board as well, typically we don't like to get information and chew the fat over it and vote in the same night. Especially if we've not discussed it as a board. Pete, do you have any thoughts on that?
I do. I'm just going to come out right and say, I mean, obviously we can see the amount of interest within the community by the attendance of our last 2 meetings. And this is not something that we can, as important as it is, we need to get as much information as we can, as quickly as we can, but we need to take action on this as quickly as we can too. Families have to plan. This is going to impact people. So I would strongly advocate for sticking with our original plan to vote on it next week.
That makes sense to me. Y'all can check it out and form your own opinions on whatever we're provided. I do agree that whatever plan we move forward with, we need the gift of time for planning. And the sooner we decide as a board, the less angst there will be all the way around. So if that's possible, Mr. Howell, I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what the turnaround time is.
Hey, I'm gonna just speak here pretty quickly. I think we can have a survey out by tomorrow. Okay. With the deadline of the weekend and have data for Monday.
Good, good. And everybody seems comfortable on the board to review that on their own, and that will help inform your decision when we get to the 7th. And then we're going to pull the trigger on the 7th. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Great, great. Appreciate the board's comments. They're very helpful. Tomorrow we will contemplate crafting the motion, and it may be 2 motions. So we'll see what that looks like based on some information that we get back, but we'll figure that out. So I'm going to close this discussion on school reopening. We are going to move on now to budget discussion. And I'm going to call on, again, Mr. Howell.
Thank you. And given the lateness of the hour, I'm going to make this a quick update for where we are. And I think with the discussion that we just had and the community discussion was a great opportunity to just hear where people are at. Obviously, we receive emails and other things from community members and from staff members, and just, again, to have this very, very important conversation. The other important conversation that typically happens during this time of year is budget, especially as we work to finalize budget, and especially for board members as you work to go ahead and send your budget to the community for their consideration. And as I shared the last couple meetings, our budget process will be a little different this year, with still looking to have a budget finalized by April 14th. But this year we will not be having the May budget validation referendum that is currently under suspension under executive order. We'll hold an informational meeting in the middle of, in 3/4 of the way through May, in preparation for the June referendum. But board members, you know that you've been working on version 4 for quite a bit of time. Version 5 was slipped into your packets this week. Stacy's been finalizing numbers and has been working to make adjustments that as we work through the cost centers. I do have paper copies. Normally, when we're going through budget, I actually can meet with you and give you your paper copies and fill your notebooks and give you the opportunity to have that. And just, we can't do that this year. So I'm going to just give you a quick update virtually. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and I just put together a couple quick slides. All right, let's present. So we are in version 5, and just want to take you back, board members, to version 4, which is the version I presented to you back on February 28th when I first presented my budget. That budget was $53,262,395. It was an increase of $2.4 million, or a 4.88% increase. We did receive some very good news, which is contributing to a significant reduction in version 5, and that's our health insurance. Health insurance typically is one of our biggest drivers for cost increases. And the version 5 that you have in front of you is $52,233,000. It's a $1 million reduction from version 4. And so that health insurance reduction of going from what we had budgeted of 12%, which was a worst case scenario, to now a high possible of 4.2. We will get our final our own personal ban for health insurance, we believe on Monday, if everything is going to go on schedule. But that was over $600,000+ in that health insurance reduction. The other thing that we've been doing is I've been working with Stacy to look at leases that we can pay off early, that we can then not carry over into further budget years. And so at this point, we are at 2.88% for a budget increase. It's a very different place than where we've been in the past. And also when coupled that with the additional subsidy we've received this year, tax impact is going to be far less than where it has been in the past. So in your board packets this week, I will include the community assessment so that you can see that. But we also, this is your time as a board to deliberate from any of the items that you heard throughout the cost centers. And of course, this cost centers, you heard an awful lot of, I don't really have any updates within my budget. And what you're seeing here is that that is then basically translating into not a huge increase to the overall RSU 14 budget for this year. So that's where we currently stand. Those updated budget packets are available electronically within your board packets. I have paper copies that are available in the office as well if you'd like to have those for your notebooks.
Does anyone on the board have any discussion points about the budget? Any concerns? Any thoughts? Mr. McLean.
Thank you, Kate. I think overall, it's been a pretty uneventful budget season in the short time that I have been on the board. It's actually been relatively quiet as far as anything coming down the pipeline. The only thing that I really just particularly did not care for was a specific line item, but we as a board don't really have any say as to those line items. That line item that I am referring to is esports. I'm sorry, I ain't buying. So that's the only thing that I really don't particularly care for. But overall, I'm pretty satisfied with this budget. I would also, I also do believe that Bob Hickey might actually benefit from an additional IT help desk, somebody that would be able to assist with the amount of tickets. We have a ungodly amount of devices, many of which, you know, they need a lot of attention, and he's operating with, honestly, I'm sorry, I can't remember the number of people that he said he had working on his staff, but it seemed like he's up against a rock and a hard place, and he's doing a great job with what he's got, but it seems like he really could use some additional assistance. We definitely need additional transportation drivers, and it's, those are hard to come by. And you know, special education techs. And I know that we have been advocating to get additional education techs. Labor is just really tough for everybody. So, but that's pretty much my 2 cents as far as this budget goes. Kate, thank you.
Can you live with this budget?
I absolutely can.
Thank you. All right, I'm not quite sure who was next. You were? Okay, March.
Let me get my hand out of there before I forget to leave that up. I have to say, now I've been on the board since 2009, and not as long as Kate, but that long. And we've seen the ups, we've seen the downs. Budget season has never been a good time for us. It has always been extremely stressful. Not as stressful as it has been for the central office and all of the administrators. And I give kudos to them. This is like, from a standpoint of an outsider, if I wasn't on the board looking in, this is the best budget we've ever had. And I feel that, you know, somehow I get the feeling like we missed something, you know, like there was something we should have given, you know, that didn't get asked for, because I'm just not used to, when we saw the big increase in, well, what Chris said, I mean, now it's been lowered because now we have the health insurance, and, you know, there's some things that were out of control. Most of our budget is out of control of everybody that presented with their cost centers. But I still give kudos that everybody that works in this district is able to make things work with the amount of money that they have in the budget in each one of their own individual budgets. So, I mean, I'm just very, very fine with this budget. And I want to thank everybody. I think you did just a wonderful job. I mean, I think it's amazing that you're able to do what you do with what you have.
Thank you, Marge. Jenny?
I was just going to say that I think everybody's done a great job at providing all the information. I think in times like these, we need to be conservative, but generous at the same time. And the staff is doing the best they can and doing a good job with that. We're right at the, just a little below state average in what we spend per pupil. You know, with times like these, I think we're doing the best we can. And I know, you know, tax increases are not fun. So a little bit is way better than a whole lot. So I think, as Marge said, kudos all around. Kudos all around.
Thank you, Jenny. Who's next? Anna? No? Kate? No? Who else have I missed anybody else? I'll just weigh in that I was really excited that we came in at 2.86, and it was just a marvel to me because so many years passed. It came in and our eyeballs just about popped out of our heads, and then we'd go through all this gyration with telling the A team, well, what does it look like at this percent? And then they'd go through all the jazz of what would they eliminate to get down to a certain percent. And I think the public should be aware that we are very respectful of our A team and the budget that they present to us. And it's not our role to pull out individual items, as Scott mentioned, and say we don't want it. There may have been times in the past where it's like, no, that's not going to happen. But for the most part, we say we can't live with this budget. This is what we'd like to see it come in at. So go back to the table and bring us back items that you think you can possibly live without, which generally is really nothing. I really feel like this is a very responsible budget. Again, given the times, I think it's remarkable actually. And I'm very proud of this budget. I think we've spent considerable time reviewing each cost center. And I would be pleased to present this to the citizens that we represent. So I'm fully in favor of this.
Can I just add one thing, Kate, because I think one of the things that we're seeing through this budget process is that we've been able to make some long-term investments with stimulus dollars that the district has received, which has then allowed us to, with those long-term investments, make adjustments to what's happening here on the local side. And I just want to thank all the different directors as they've worked through, and our building administrators for really looking back, how do we take those funds and invest in our kids and our teachers and our support staff and in our infrastructure to make sure that these are long-term investments and not dollars that we become dependent on. And so I think part of what you're seeing here, especially in the area of technology and what we've been able to lease, if we had not had those stimulus dollars, we would not have been able to purchase the laptops that are going to Randy and Danielle and Beth for that 4-5, which then would have been reflected in the budget in a long-term lease. So we are thankful that we've had the ability, but just for the public to know that they are starting to see some impact in this budget from that.
And also a big shout out to Stacy, who's probably watching, who generates all the papers and coordinates all of our budget books and goes through all the numbers, which just boggles the mind if you were ever to see one of our budget books. It's quite a meaty piece of work. So thank you, Stacy. So we will move forward next week and vote on this budget, and that will be an agenda item. We're going to move on to policies. May I have a motion, please?
To approve the first reading of revised policy JLCB, immunization of students.
Second.
Thank you. It was moved and seconded by Pete and Scott. Any public comment? I don't see any hands. I'd like to specifically comment on this, that this immunization policy is in no way related to COVID. This is a result of change in LD 798. Mr. Howell sent out a letter, what's the date here? On March 19th, 2021 to staff and community. And included in that letter was a pretty in-depth discussion of what this policy meant. You're gonna have to forgive me because I feel like it's important enough because of a timing standpoint that I want the public to be fully informed why we're doing this and why we're doing this now. This policy removes both philosophical and religious exemptions from the exceptions to immunization requirements. Medical exemptions will be accepted, but must be provided annually to the school nurse from a provider licensed by the Maine State Medical Board. This is critical. This is a critical piece regarding IEP. Students who currently have an IEP dated prior to 9/1/21 can still request a religious or philosophical exemption as long as it is accompanied by a letter from the child's licensed provider that states that they have discussed the benefits and risks of immunizations with the parent or guardian. This documentation is required at the beginning of every school year. It is important for you to understand that if your child is either non-immunized, or completely immunized and may currently have either a philosophical or religious exemption for immunizations on file at school, then your child's current immunization status does not permit school attendance on September 1st, 2021. And that's the important date regarding this policy. We wanted to put this forth. We currently have a policy that was approved on 2014, I believe it is. We're bringing this to you now because we know it's going to take parents some time to schedule vaccines, particularly if they have a series that they need, takes in between times to get done. So with that being said, this is a revised policy that we currently have on the books. Any other board discussion since I've chewed the fat? Yep. Pete.
All right, so the other thing that's gonna come up potentially we heard in the news today that Pfizer's come out with some very promising results in terms of adolescents for the vaccine.
Yep.
Oh, we don't know what's going to happen with the COVID vaccine between now and the start of school next year. But one thing that's got to be on the minds of everyone is that with these COVID vaccines, you are not allowed to get other vaccines either 2 weeks prior or 2 weeks after the dosing of these other vaccines. So from a parent's perspective, if things happen and the COVID vaccine becomes available to students, there's going to have to be some considerations as to what vaccine do you get. And I don't know if that's widely known. My wife works in the health field. She alerted me to that fact, but
right.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to be on a short time frame if both of those, if the vaccine for COVID becomes available in the summer or in the fall, and it's going to complicate timing with the other vaccines. So I just thought I'd mention that.
No, thank you. Included in this letter is also the main school immunization requirement. And for those who are listening in, if anybody has any questions at all about whether their kiddos are or are not vaccinated, please reach out to your nurses and they can tell you what they have on record. I hear what you're saying. We're just adhering to the law that, that's a consideration for parents, certainly for timing. As far as what our requirements are, until we hear that the CDC or the main DOE or the XYZ decides that a COVID is required, the parents will have to carefully consider their timing for their vaccination. So thanks for pointing that out. All right, let's vote. All those in favor?
Let me get my vote list out.
Yeah.
Kate Bricks?
Yes.
Jenny Butler?
Yes.
Janie Cummings? Marge Gavoni?
Yes.
Pete Hensler?
Aye.
Anna Keeney?
Yes.
Kate Levier?
Yes.
Scott McLean?
Yay.
Christina Small?
Yes.
It has been approved. Thank you. Let's move on to the report of the secretary. May I have a motion for Marge? Katja.
You did. Okay. I move to approve the minutes of the March 24th, 2021 meeting.
Second.
Thank you, people. Thank you.
Wrap it up.
Marge, and I'm going to let somebody else figure out who the second is.
It was Jenny.
Okay. That's it. We're going to move on to committee reports. Finance, anything?
Ms. Bricks, we just need to vote on the motion.
Oh,
Well,
that'd be lovely. I thought we
Public
did.
comment, board discussion.
And board comment.
Trying to get you out. All right. Discussion.
So Chris, I happen to notice on the minutes, I don't think that, and maybe I missed it, so I apologize if I did. I don't know if the board got an answer to one of the questions that I asked Mr. Hansen as far as the signage goes. I'm trying to find it right now. I apologize. Hang on one second.
Signage for what?
Scott, I have the question here. Would you like me to read it?
Yes, please. Thank you.
So Scott McLean inquires about when the middle school projects needed prior to the new construction, also inquires about the signage and why signage couldn't be allocated under the district-wide cost. Rather, it was assigned to the facilities.
Yes, that is
Is that
correct.
what you were
Thank
asking?
You. Yes. So I was just looking for follow-up on that one.
Scott, I will send you an email tomorrow. I need to check on that.
No problem. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, any further comments on the report of the secretary? Seeing none, shall we vote?
Kate Bricks?
Yes.
Jenny Butler?
Yes.
Marge Gavoni?
Yes.
Pete Hensler?
Aye.
Anna Keeney?
Yes.
Kate Levier?
Yes.
Scott McLean?
Yay.
Christina Small.
Yes.
The minutes have been approved. Now may we move forward to committee reports. Pete, anything?
Nothing on finance.
Nope. Facilities, Scott?
Nothing on facilities, and I don't know if Wyndham Middle School committee, we plan on meeting, is it next Thursday, the 8th? Is that correct? Do I have that?
Yep.
Pulling it out of there.
Very good.
Thank you.
Very good, Scott. Okay. And policy met this week. I have to say, we met with the nurses and we did meet and have a very good dialogue with the immunization of students policy a week or so ago. And then this week we met again with them regarding, as a follow-up to communicable diseases policy, which we do have on the books. And we have sought feedback from our illustrious Drummond and Woodsum and have a template that we worked off of and did a side-by-side with our current policy. So we worked through that, and a first revised reading will be coming forth to you. And that's all I have on policy. Any other reports? Marge, anybody else? No?
Nope, no meeting yet.
Okay, thank you all. Now we will move into the superintendent's report.
And I just have one quick item tonight, which is a follow-up on what Scott talked about. So the Wyndham Middle School Building Committee had its first meeting last Thursday, and I'm happy to report that Scott is going to be our chair for the building committee, and Jared Maxfield, who is on the Wyndham Town Council, is going to be our co-chair. And so we had our first organizational meeting, had a chance to go ahead and discuss kind of our process. Also happy to report that on March 24th, we received 6 pre-qualification packets from 6 different architectural firms in the state of Maine. Some very qualified organizations that have extensive experience in school construction projects. And at our next meeting, we will be going over a rubric for rating those packets and then determining which of those organizations that we want to interview, and then also which of the building samples that we want to go and visit for those particular organizations. So it's exciting to see some of that project is starting to kick off and is moving along. Marge?
Lower my hand. Are we going to get, will we be getting those ahead of time before the meeting, Chris?
No, the packets will come after we set the rubric for which we're going to rate them.
Okay, no cheating, huh? All right.
No cheating. We're going to make sure that we give every organization a fair opportunity to be considered.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Hell. And finally, board roundtable. Anyone who wishes to round the table? Oh, there you are. Who's first? I'm looking to the right, and I'm going to go with Scott. How about that?
Thank you, Kate. Real quickly, I just wanted to give a big shout out to all of our student athletes. Right now, there is quite a few of them that are juggling between 2 sports. I think that it's great that we are able to get back into sports, and I think it's also giving these kids a little bit of, a sense of responsibility as far as communicating with their coaches as to, sports conflicts and stuff like that. It's not easy for them to just kind of be thrown into something like this. It's a little out of the realm of norm for them. But I just wanted to tip my hat to a lot of those student athletes who are finding themselves juggling this little bit of a balancing act. So nice job, guys.
Thank you, Scott. Marge?
I know most of them are gone right now, but I really wanted to thank everybody that showed up tonight. I don't think we didn't have this big a crowd when we were gonna stop music. in the middle school years ago, which was people were passionate about, you know. So again, and again, I want to thank Chris and everybody in central office and all the administrators and the teachers for all the great stuff they've done for some kids have not adapted well, and that's a given. I don't think anybody should ever feel bad about that, or not. They can feel bad, but not guilty, because across the United States, it goes right across that a lot of the kids are not doing well with the situation the way it is. And I think that we are extremely lucky in RSU 14 that our teachers and our students have been given an opportunity to make a choice, where that did not happen in a lot of places. So again, I just want to thank everybody in RSU 14 for making this happen. I think it's been great. Not quite what we would have hoped for, but you know what? You made the very, very best of a terrible situation. And I think it was great.
Thank you, Marge. Anyone else? Seeing none, thank you for your patience this evening and your attentiveness to all the folks who braved the Zoom tonight. I'm sure Mr. Howe will be informing us once the survey has been completed and gone out so that we can take a look at it too. And I look forward to the results, and then you can contemplate, and we will vote next week on this most difficult decision. So thank you all. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Kate Bricks?
Yes.
Jenny Butler?
Yes.
Marge Gavoni?
Yes.
Pete Hensler?
Aye.
Anna Keeney?
Yes.
Kate Leviang?
Yes.
Scott McLean?
Aye.
Christina Small?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time. Good night.
Thank
Night all.